Chapter 834. What's the matter? I'm having a good time in the game. When she saw Gahan, Gu Xuanwu was obviously a little unhappy, which meant that she was having a good time in the game. You can enter the game? Gahan was taken aback. This Gu Xuanwu could actually enter the game. Could it be that she was really no different from a human in her human form? Exactly the same? Of course, Gu Xuanwu said proudly. I even synchronized by Tai's sword. I've promised by Tai that we'll be good friends in real life. You synchronized with Sword Lady in the game? Gohan was so surprised that he was speechless. A Yuan Ko could actually synchronize with Sword Lady. Gohan felt that his common sense had exploded. Was this Gu Xuanwu really his daughter? Come on, these things have nothing to do with you. Tell me, why did you call me over in such a hurry? Gu Xuanwu said in disdain. Didn't you tell me the day we met that your mother is living in Shanghai Pass? Gohan said a shocking fact. Gu Xuanwu's mother actually lived in Shanghai Pass. She lived in the most tragic battlefield in human history. Every inch of land was a place where fierce battles took place. It's not Shanghai Pass, it's a dimensional gap in Shanghai Pass. Gu Xuanwu corrected. Regardless of whether it's a dimensional gap or not, one thing is clear. If you want me to see your mother, I have to make a trip to Shanghai Pass, right? Guhan said. Yes. Gu Xuanwu did not refute this time. But didn't you say that you still have a lot of things to do and will need some time before you can go back with me? No. Things have changed now. I might leave for Shanghai Pass as soon as tonight. But this time, I might set off with the human army, so you can't appear in front of them. You have to enter my dimensional pocket with Yuan Ko's form. Only then can I bring you into Shanghai Pass. Do you understand? Dimensional pocket? What's that? Gu Xuanwu tilted his head and asked. You don't need to know what it is. All you need to know is to stay inside, and I will bring you into Shanghai Pass. Otherwise, you'll have to find a way to enter the Shanghai Pass and meet me there, Gahan said coldly. Come on, I have the ability to come out, but I don't have the ability to go back in. You humans have surrounded the Shanghai Pass like an iron wall, and there's also the Zhou Star Battle Formation on top. Other than following you, what else can I do? Gu Xuanwu said helplessly. According to what she told Gahan, she didn't leave Shanghai Pass through a normal passageway. Instead, she left Shanghai Pass through a dimensional tunnel in the dimensional gap. Otherwise, how could Gu Xuanwu, a half-baked Netherrealm Yuan Ko, break through the Zhou Star Battle Formation that not even 12 Zhu Wu could break and leave the Shanghai Pass? Unfortunately, this dimensional tunnel was a one-way tunnel. After Gu Xuanwu came out, she couldn't enter again. Therefore, she could only rely on Gahan and enter Shanghai Pass through Gahan. However, it was impossible for Gahan to bring a strange person like Gu Xuanwu into Shanghai Pass. Gu Xuanwu wasn't even a sword bearer, so how could the Shanghai Pass Management Committee agree to let her enter Shanghai Pass? Therefore, Gahan had to put Gu Xuanwu into his dimensional pocket, just like how he had put the 3 Egyptian deities into his dimensional pocket 2 months ago and brought them into Yuzhong City. Although Gu Xuanwu didn't want to enter Gahan's dimensional pocket, she could only agree with Gahan's suggestion since she had no other way to enter Shanghai Pass. However, Gu Xuanwu suggested that she could only enter Gahan's dimensional pocket at the last moment. Now, she wanted to enjoy her last bit of freedom. Up to you. I'm going to the Sword Committee meeting now. You can enjoy your freedom around the Sword Committee. You have to be on call. Gahan could only say that. Don't worry, don't worry. Speaking of which, why are you going to the Sword Committee meeting now? Didn't you say to gather at 8 o'clock? It's only 6:10 now. Isn't it a little too early? Gu Xuanwu asked curiously. I still have to go see Lu Shihua. There are some things I need to do. This has nothing to do with you. Gahan left after saying that. Are you kidding? What do you mean it has nothing to do with me? I'm your daughter. Also, who is Lu Shihua? No, for the sake of my mother, I must get to the bottom of this. Gu Xuanwu's little head turned and he muttered to himself. When Gahan received Lu Shihua's call, Lu Shihua was in a meeting at the Yanjing City Sword Committee. Therefore, Gahan asked Lu Shihua to meet at the Sword Committee. Lu Shihua didn't dare to neglect Gahan's request. The meeting was only halfway through before she left. She sat quietly in the hall of the Sword Committee and waited for Gahan's arrival. Lu Shihua didn't wait too long. In just a few minutes, Gahan appeared in front of her. It could be seen that Gahan was in a hurry all the way. There was sweat on his forehead. It was obvious that he ran all the way. There's still an hour and 40 minutes. There's no need to rush here in such a hurry, right? Lu Shihua asked inexplicably. What made Lu Shihua even more puzzled was the girl in the white silk uniform behind Gahan. She held Gahan's hand tightly. The expression on her face was full of intimacy. It was as if they had an extraordinary relationship. Teacher is really too much. He already has so many women at home, yet he still wants to find another one when he's in Yanjing City. But since teacher has found so many women, why doesn't he be more intimate with me? Lu Shihua lamented in his heart. Husband, who is this woman? Is she your new concubine? Gu Xuanwu blinked his eyes and then asked Gahan very coquettishly. Husband, Lu Shihua was completely dizzy. They hadn't seen each other for a few days, and Master was already married? Ignore her. Just treat what she said as nonsense and ignore her existence. Gahan pulled his hand out. Let's go to Sword Pavilion with me now. Sword Pavilion? Why are we going there? Lu Shihua looked confused. To find your sword lady. The reason why Gahan brought Lu Shihua to Yanjing City was to help Lu Shihua coordinate his sword lady. However, many things happened after they came to Yanjing City, causing this matter to be pushed back again and again. Now that the 8 Academies assembly was over, Gahan might have to go to Shanghai Pass, and this trip might take a few years. So, Gahan had to help Lu Shihua coordinate his sword lady in the last hour or so. But Master, Lu Shihua wanted to say something, but Gahan grabbed his wrist rudely. If you have anything to say, we can talk when we get to Sword Pavilion. We don't have time to waste. But Master, I'm still an ordinary person. If I want to synchronize with the sword lady, do I have to submit an application first, have my body checked, and take the exam before I can go to the Sword Pavilion to synchronize with her? Lu Shihua asked weakly. Gahan didn't say anything. He had to admit that Gahan really forgot that there was such a step to synchronize the sword lady for the first time. Moreover, this was in Yanjing City, and he couldn't use the privilege of Yuzhong City at all. It was quite embarrassing. Fill out the application first. Gahan could only pull Lu Shihua to the counter of the Swordbearer Service Center. He asked for a form from the attendant and began to fill out the application for synchronization. However, after a while, Lu Shihua quietly pulled Gahan's sleeve and pointed to the occupation column on the form. He asked weakly, "What should I fill in here?" "Fill in whatever occupation it is." Of course, Gahan knew what Lu Shihua was asking him. Don't worry about those strange things. You are the real pavilion master now. Lu Shihua nodded and then solemnly filled in the occupation column with the words Sword Pavilion Master. Although Lu Shihua was very hesitant when filling out the form, it was a waste of time. The attendant glanced at the form roughly and probably only looked at Lu Shihua's name. He didn't pay attention to the occupation at all because it had no effect on the application to become a sword bearer. In the end, this form would probably become a pile of useless information and be piled up in a dimensional warehouse somewhere. Perhaps no one would care about it, even after thousands of years. Therefore, whether it was before or after the apocalypse, things like filling out forms were mostly useless and a waste of resources. However, one had to fill it up because if they didn't fill it up and something went wrong, they would be in big trouble. All right, both of you, please go to the number 7 and number 8 physical examination centers for your physical examination. When the physical examination confirms that your sword element has reached 100 quarks, you can take the exam and enter the sword pavilion for synchronization. After hearing the attendant's words, Gahan seemed to have returned to the memories of him and Song Hama coming to the Swordbearer Service Center and meeting Song Yifei, Liu Yinling, and finally Qingpin. This was a very important day for Gahan because he had met the most important women in his life on this day. However, Gahan and Song Hama had gotten it together that day, so he had 2 numbers. However, there was only Lu Shihua now. Why were there 2 numbers? Gahan turned around and realized that Gu Xuanwu, who was beside him, had filled out a form and handed it to the attendant. Then, he also received a number from the attendant. The attendant probably saw that Gu Xuanwu and Gahan were together, so he said there were 2 people. "What are you doing?" Gahan pulled Gu Xuanwu to the side and scolded him softly. It seemed that Gahan was really like Gu Xuanwu's father. What do you mean? Don't you understand? I want to be a sword bearer. I promised by Tai that we would be friends in real life. Gu Xuanwu said confidently. But you're a Yuan Ko. Yuan Ko can't be a sword bearer, Gahan said. You are a human. Gu Xuanwu paused. I am your daughter, and I am also a human. For the first time, Gahan felt that Gu Xuanwu might really be his daughter. Chapter 835. It's here. Let's go check the amount of sword essence in your body. Gahan brought Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu to the entrance of the examination center and prepared to enter examination room number 7 with Lu Shihua. Aren't you going in with me? At this time, Gu Xuanwu suddenly shouted at Gahan. I won't accompany you. Guhan replied coldly. Puffed. Who wants you to accompany me? Gu Xuanwu spat and rushed into examination room number 8 alone, leaving behind a calm Gahan and a similarly unhappy Lu Shihua. All right, little sister, you're very amazing. You actually have such a high amount of innate sword essence. The person in charge of examining Lu Shihua's body was an old nurse in her 60s. After the results of the examination came out, she said to Lu Shihua with a face full of smiles, Old woman, I only see such a high amount of innate sword essence once or twice a month. Little sister, you must do your best. Strive to find a sword lady that belongs to you and contribute your strength to the rise of mankind. Of course, the old nurse didn't know Lu Shihua's true identity. If she knew that the little girl in front of her was actually the master of the sword pavilion in Yuzhong City, I don't think she would speak to Lu Shihua with such a tone and attitude. And you, young man, you also have to do your best. Strive to become a sword bearer yourself. Otherwise, when your girlfriend becomes a sword bearer, she won't like you anymore. The old nurse said to Gahan. The old nurse's eyes didn't seem to be very good. She didn't seem to see that Gahan had 3 sword scabbards hanging on his body. Thank you, Granny Nurse, Lu Shihua said sweetly, and then took his examination form. The number 365 quarks was clearly written on the sword essence column. Having more than 300 quarks of innate sword essence was indeed a very amazing thing. It was already at the level of 1 in 10,000. However, it couldn't be compared to Liu Ling's innate sword essence, which was close to 10,000. It's exactly a year's time. Gahan saw this number of sword essence and couldn't help but mutter in his heart. He vaguely felt that this number seemed to have a special meaning. But what exactly did this meaning mean? Gahan didn't know. Gahan didn't have much time to think before he suddenly heard a shocking scream from the room next door, as if something terrible had happened. Not good. That's Gu Xuanwu's examination room. The scream came from there. Gahan immediately stood up from his chair and looked at the room nervously. Could it be that the medical equipment has discovered Gu Xuanwu's true identity and found out that she is a Yuan Ko? Thinking of this possibility, Gahan felt a chill run down his spine. Because of the incident with Ku Rakin, the entire Yinjing city was now extremely sensitive to the situation of Yuan Ko's infiltration. If others were to discover Gu Xuanwu's true identity, Tian knew if he would end up like Ku Rakin, locked up in jail. Gahan rushed out of the examination room 7 and instantly appeared in the examination room 8. Gahan took a closer look, only to see that the nurse in the 8th examination room was trembling as she held onto a checklist in her hand, while Gu Xuanwu was sitting there with a smile on his face, without the slightest bit of fear. Sorry, no one saw Gahan's movements clearly, and the checklist in the nurse's hand appeared in Gahan's hand. Gahan made up his mind that if this checklist found out that Gu Xuanwu was a Yuan Ko, then Gahan would immediately destroy this checklist, then knock out the nurse and destroy all the data here to see if he could hide Gu Xuanwu's true identity. If it really didn't work, then Gahan could only escape from Yinjing City. As long as he left Yinjing City, Gahan believed that no one would be able to catch him again. Race, Human Han. Gahan first looked at the position of the race on the checklist and then let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, it seemed that Gu Xuanwu's human form was very perfect. Even such a sophisticated instrument could not detect her identity as a human and Yuan Ko hybrid. But the real identity of Gu Xuanwu was not discovered. Then why did the nurse scream? Did she see a ghost? At this time, the nurse finally found out that the checklist in her hand had disappeared. She looked around inexplicably and saw that Guhan had suddenly appeared in the examination room. And in Guhan's hand was the examination report that she had just been looking at. "What are you doing? Who allowed you to take the doctor's things?" The nurse immediately asked bluntly. "I wanted to ask you, why did you scream just now?" Guhan did not answer, but asked the nurse a question. "All right, why did I scream?" The nurse thought blankly, then suddenly thought of something and screamed again. "Ah!" The nurse pointed at Gu Xuanwu and screamed, "She's not human. She's not human." When Gahan heard this, he immediately became a little nervous. Could it be that the nurse found evidence that Gu Xuanwu was not human from the other data on the checklist? She's a genius, a super genius, the #1 genius in the world, unparalleled in the world. The nurse's next words made Gohan's whole face stiffen. Then, he immediately looked at the checklist in his hand and directly looked at the place where the sword element number was written. The red 5-digit number 95628 almost blinded Gahan's eyes. It was actually a number close to 100,000. So far, who had the highest innate sword element among humans? Some people said it was Kinzu, because Kinzu directly synchronized with the famous swordswoman. Later, Kinzu also admitted that his innate sword element was around 15,000 points. However, this view was not recognized by everyone because there was no way to detect sword element in that era. All the sword element was estimated by later generations and could not be used as an accurate basis. When humans had an accurate method to detect sword element, the highest recorded innate sword element was 14,893 quarks. This was a number that blinded everyone, and this number had not changed for more than 700 years. In the past 700 years, no one had been able to surpass this number. Moreover, according to statistics, the average innate sword element of humans was constantly declining, so it was almost impossible to find someone who could surpass this number in the future. But now, this number had been surpassed by 6 times, reaching a shocking 95,628 quarks. This was a number that could almost destroy all human common sense. No wonder the nurse screamed after seeing this number. If Gahan was the nurse, he would also scream. Seeing that there were people gradually looking over to see what was going on, Gohan immediately put the checklist into his dimensional pocket and said to the nurse calmly, "What are you screaming for? What's there to scream about? Is there anything strange about this? Isn't there anything strange about this?" After hearing Gahan's words, the nurse finally stopped screaming. This is an innate sword element of 95,628 quarks. She has already created a record that humans can no longer break. Who told you this is innate sword element? Gohan said disdainfully. This was all her acquired sword element, and her real innate sword element was only a few hundred quarks. That's impossible. The nurse was at a loss. The checklist she brought clearly states that she's only 18 years old, and she's an ordinary person. How could she have acquired the acquired sword element? You've been tricked by her. Gohan glared at Gu Xuanwu fiercely. She only looks young. She's already 28 years old, and she's not an ordinary person. She's a famous sword-rank swordsman. She usually likes to play tricks on people. I apologize on her behalf. So that's how it is. So she's already a famous sword-rank swordsman. I knew it. How could a human have 95,628 quarks of innate sword element? Perhaps it was because the truth of 95,628 had destroyed her worldview too much that the nurse's subconscious could not accept it at all. Therefore, when Gahan gave her a barely acceptable explanation, the nurse instinctively accepted it. Even after Gahan left examination room 8 with Gu Xuanwu, the nurse was still immersed in the incident and could not extricate herself from it for a long time. It was not until 10 minutes later that the nurse suddenly came to a realization and patted her head. That's not right. This data should have been provided by the personal terminal. It's impossible for her to have faked her age and identity. Thinking of this, the nurse immediately turned on her computer and wanted to look up the information on Gu Xuanwu. However, All the information on Gu Xuanwu had disappeared. No matter how hard the nurse searched, she could not find any trace of Gu Xuanwu. This discovery immediately made the nurse silent. The nurse, who usually liked to watch all kinds of conspiracy theories, immediately felt as if she had discovered a shocking secret. This secret must be related to some secret plan of the human race. That was why Gu Xuanwu's information was deleted in an instant. Moreover, there might even be people coming to kill her immediately. Thinking of this, the nurse felt a kind of earth-shattering terror. Then, she fled home without even applying for leave. She packed some things and hid in a childhood friend's house for a whole month. By the time she realized that it seemed like no one was coming to kill her, it was already too late. Due to continuous absenteeism for a month, the Swordsman Service Center had already fired her. Moreover, because of this terrible absenteeism record, it was very difficult for her to find another job. After more than 3 months of failure to find a job, the nurse felt that her spirit and body were greatly damaged. She concocted a bottle of high-concentration sleeping pills and drank it. In the end, she passed away miserably from this world. No matter what, Gahan did not expect that a casual lie of his would cause someone to walk into a dead end. Therefore, people should not casually lie to others. Who knows, someone might die from your lies. Chapter 836. How is it? Did you set it as confidential? Gohan asked Lu Shihua, who was next to her. After leaving the inspection room 8 with the Gu Xuanwu, Gohan immediately asked Lu Shihua to set all the information about the Gu Xuanwu as an SSS-level confidential in Yuzhong City. Since the Gu Xuanwu's personal terminal belonged to Yuzhong City, Lu Shihua, as the head of the Sword Garret in Yuzhong City, could naturally do this easily. At the same time, because this was an SSS-level confidential information belonging to Yuzhong City, only the 2 most powerful people in Yuzhong City could read this information unless it was inquired in the name of the Sword Garret. This was also the reason why the nurse couldn't find the information of the solid black tortoise when she tried to check it again, because the level of the hospital was not even qualified to know this information, let alone read it. 95628 Innate Sword Essence. Is she really a human? Even though Lu Shihua had read this information countless times, she couldn't help but feel shocked every time she saw this number. She felt that the Gu Xuanwu was no longer a human. The lie that Gahan used to deceive the nurse naturally couldn't fool Lu Shihua. Moreover, Gahan didn't want to lie to Lu Shihua. This was because the Gu Xuanwu couldn't be hidden from people who were close to her, and there was no need to hide it from people who were close to her. Guhan didn't want to be like those idiot protagonists in those 8 p.m. family ethics TV series, deliberately hiding things that were not necessary to be hidden from the person who loved him, causing all kinds of misunderstandings under the inexplicable intention of doing something for his own good. In the end, both sides suffered a lot, and then he could easily pull out 20 to 30 episodes of bitter drama. Lu Shihua was destined to be Jindy, so Gohan didn't want any misunderstandings between her and Lu Shihua, which would lead to the rupture of their relationship. Therefore, Gohan explained to Lu Shihua, Gu Xuanwu's situation is very special. She is both a human and a Yuan Ko. Her physique can freely switch between the two. As a Yuan Ko, she was already close to the level of a nether-level Yuan Ko. Now that she's a human, she might also have the sword essence of a nether-level Yuan Ko. Gohan told Lu Shihua his conjecture in full detail, but Lu Shihua was still in a state of confusion. Humph, why don't you tell her I'm your daughter? Are you not willing to admit your mother's existence to anyone? Not willing to admit to anyone that you had a relationship with a Yuan Ko, and even gave birth to a daughter? Hearing that Gahan did not take the initiative to confess that she was her daughter, Gu Xuanwu seemed to be somewhat angry. Huh? Lu Shihua was still confused. What daughter? He didn't understand at all. I said, I don't know your mother at all, and I don't know what's going on with you claiming to be my daughter. Before I completely understand the truth of the matter, I will never admit that you are my daughter. Gahan knocked Gu Xuanwu's head hard, then knocked Lu Shihua's head, then asked, Do you understand now? No. Lu Shihua shook his head hard, but I believe in Master. Whatever Master says, I will do. I still need to make a subjective judgment, but I believe that Master is definitely right. Guhan nodded in satisfaction, then held Lu Shihua's hand. Let's go. Let's go to the exam hall now. We only have an hour left. The layout of the exam venue in Yanjing City was similar to that in Yuzhong City. There was a row of benches for people to rest on outside the door. Thinking back to the time when Guhan learned telepathy from Liu Ling on this bench, he felt quite emotional thinking about it now. Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu were both in the exam venue. Originally, Guhan didn't want Gu Xuanwu to go in, but Gu Xuanwu strongly requested to go in. Thinking about it, Guhan didn't stop Gu Xuanwu. This was because Guhan really wanted to know if this cheap daughter of his could synchronize with the Sword Lady in the real world. But soon, Guhan regretted this decision because Gu Xuanwu's voice became noisy in Guhan's ears. Hey, let me ask you, which swordsman killed Sora Aoi? Also, this winter horse Hesha and Xiao Mu Tsung Shuetsai, which one is the mistress and which one is the bitch? And this, Yuenko, who turned over a new leaf and helped the humans defeat the Martyr's Palace. For some reason, Gu Xuanwu also knew telepathy. Then, Gu Xuanwu threw all the questions on the exam to Guhan and asked Guhan to answer them for him. He didn't know who came up with the exam questions in Yanjing City. Out of the 10 questions, there were actually 2 or 3 that even Guhan couldn't answer. This was the super top student Guhan who scored more than 1,900 points in yesterday's Elite 8 Academy's assembly. There are actually 20 to 30% of the questions that Guhan couldn't answer. For example, this Sora Aoi's name, Guhan hadn't even heard of it before. Winter Horse Hesha and Xiao Mu Tsang Shuetsai had heard of them once or twice. They were a pair of enemies in the Free City. When they visited Yanjing City, they made quite a lot of jokes. This little mistress Guhan knew what it meant. But what the hell was this bitch? Guhan had never heard of this term before. As for Yuenko, who had once helped humans destroy the Martyr's Palace, Guhan knew her very well. However, whenever he thought of her name, he would always feel a little sad. It would be great if he could see her again. She's King Arthur Artoria. Guhan still told Gu Xuanwu this name. King Arthur? Artoria? What a familiar name. Gu Xuanwu smacked his lips. I remember now. My mom has a set of armor in her room. It's said to belong to that King Arthur. It's very precious, and I won't even be able to touch it. What? What did you say? Guhan stood up abruptly, scaring the people around him who were waiting for his friend to finish his exam. I said I have a set of King Arthur's armor at home. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Gu Xuanwu asked out of the blue. Not at the moment. Guhan sat back down. It seemed like he had to follow Gu Xuanwu to her home. Perhaps he could find clues about Artoria there. Husband, before you become an immortal sword wielder, you must not try to find news about Sister Artoria. Even if you accidentally find news about Sister Artoria, you must not look for her. Husband, please promise Qing Er this, okay? At this moment, I Ching's words rang in Guhan's ears again. This was the promise that I Ching had made Guhan make at the end of the Heroes Begin at the End Instance Dungeon. Guhan had also promised I Ching that he would not try to find Artoria before he became a sword immortal level swordsman. But when the clues about Artoria were really placed in front of Guhan, Guhan hesitated again. Such a great opportunity was placed in front of her. Was she really going to give it up? With this starting point, my combat ability is no longer at the top of the meteor level Yuan Ko. Even if I'm facing a universe level Yuan Ko, I should be able to guarantee that I won't die. Does this mean that I already have the ability of an immortal sword wielder? And this is just Artoria's armor. It can't be considered a clue. Even if this is a clue, as long as I don't really look for Artoria, it shouldn't be considered as breaking my promise to I Ching. This was the process of deceiving oneself and others. Although he knew that this was breaking his promise to I Ching, under Guhan's own consolation, this promise did not seem to be broken. In short, when a person's heart was desperate to do something, then all previous promises would become a laughable joke. Just like those men who swore to quit smoking, they still had cigarettes in their mouths in the end. Master? Master? Lu Shihua's concerned voice suddenly came into her ears. Gahan looked up and saw that Lu Shihua had already left the examination room. Obviously, she had already finished all the questions. How did the exam go? Gahan stopped thinking about Artoria and turned to care about Lu Shihua's results. This was because Gahan knew that before she met him, Lu Shihua only attended elementary school and had no knowledge about sword wielder. Furthermore, he knew nothing about sword bearers. Although he had studied a lot of knowledge about sword bearers after meeting Linley, it would still be quite difficult for him to pass the test. Your disciple is not capable. I only scored 90 points. I'll let you down, master, Lu Shihua said with shame. Not bad. This result is already very good. Gahan nodded. This result was already beyond Gahan's expectations. It seemed that Lu Shihua had not been idle during this period of time. Instead, she had furiously studied a lot of knowledge about sword wielder. Otherwise, she would not have been able to score 90 points in this exam, where the average score was only about 65 points. Haha, I scored 95 points. Following closely behind Lu Shihua, Gu Xuanwu also walked out with a face full of smiles and announced his score loudly. When Lu Shihua heard Gu Xuanwu's score, her face was first filled with shame. Then, as if she had realized something, she looked at Gahan with a face full of doubt, as if she was asking Gahan. Since Gu Xuanwu was half human and half Yuan Ko, he should have never been to school. How could he score 95 points, which even a genius student would find hard to do? Ahem. Gahan did not answer Lu Shihua's question. Of course, he could not tell Lu Shihua that he had actually answered almost all the questions on the exam paper. However, on the basis that he could not confirm the correct answers to 20% of the questions, Gu Xuanwu actually scored 95 points. It seemed that if he did not become a sword wielder, being a teacher would not be a bad choice. All right, it's time to meet your sword mistress. Gahan patted Lu Shihua's shoulder. I think the two-winged angel sword mistress should be impatient. Chapter 837. You still have the nerve to come here. As soon as he brought Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu into the sword pavilion, he was blocked by an angry sword wielder. Gahan remembered this sword wielder. The last time he came to the sword pavilion to confront sword immortal Tian Hen, this sword wielder was one of the sword pavilion's forces. He stood in front of Gahan, but was easily KO'd by Gahan. Why wouldn't I have the nerve to come here? Gahan snorted coldly. Am I the one who committed the crime? Even though you're not the one who committed the crime, it was your companion. Are you going to deny it? The sword wielder said indignantly. What a joke. Since when did the sword committee add a rule that implicates others? Even if Ku Rakin is my son, I have nothing to do with his crime. Why can't I come here? Guhan's words made the sword wielder speechless. The sword wielder wanted to say something else, but he was interrupted by someone on the second floor. All right, let them in. Our Yanjing city still cares about our reputation. Besides, since when did the sword pavilion fall to such a state? The person on the second floor said coldly. Gahan felt that the voice was familiar. He looked up and saw that it was indeed an acquaintance he hadn't seen in a long time in Yanjing City. Junior Gahan pays his respects to Master Wuzhong Shifang. Gahan bowed respectfully to the person. This person was none other than sword immortal Wuzhong Shifang, who had saved Gahan's life in the Meiling mountain range. He didn't expect to see him in the sword pavilion at this time. Come up. With that, Wuzhong Shifang disappeared from the railing on the second floor. The sword wielder could only let Gahan lead Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu into the second floor of the sword pavilion. There was a sofa and a tea table on the second floor of the sword pavilion. However, Wuzhong Shifang didn't sit on the sofa. Instead, he knelt in front of the tea table. His Kusanagi no Tsurugi was placed beside him. This was the standard posture of the Fuso warriors. It seemed that Wuzhong Shifang had not completely forgotten where he belonged like most of the Fuso bloodline. Long time no see, my lord. Since Wuzhong Shifang was kneeling there, Gahan naturally didn't dare to sit on the sofa. He could only copy Wuzhong Shifang and kneel in front of the coffee table. I saw you a few days ago. Wuzhong Shifang took out a small teapot and 2 small teacups from his dimensional pocket. The tea in the teapot seemed to have been brewed, so Wuzhong Shifang directly filled 2 small teacups and then placed 1 cup in front of Gahan. Drink. Good tea. Gahan took a deep breath of the fragrance of the tea and then finished the tea in the teacup in 1 gulp. 3 months ago, this junior would have never imagined that one day I would actually be able to receive the treatment of being personally poured tea by Lord Shifang. 3 months ago, I also didn't think that one day I would actually be willing to pour tea for you. Wuzhong Shifang smiled. He really didn't expect it. 3 months ago, the ancient sword-level sword wielder who knelt in front of him and begged him to accept him as a disciple had actually grown into a famous sword-level sword wielder. Moreover, he had defeated the current descendant of the Liuonian family, Liuonian Ling, and became the #1 sword wielder in the famous sword level. Then let this junior pour tea for my lord. Gahan took the teapot from Wuzhong Shifang's hand and filled the teacups for himself and Wuzhong Shifang. Good tea. Wuzhong Shifang took a deep breath of the fragrance of the tea and then finished the tea in the teacup in 1 gulp. Tell me, why did you come to my Yinjing City Sword Pavilion? Don't tell me that you can already synchronize the coordination of a spirit sword level sword niece. No. How could this junior speed reach such a level? Gahan looked at Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu behind him. I have 2 friends who need to synchronize the sword niece, so I accompanied them here. After all, I might have to rush to Shanghai Pass tonight, and the next time I come to Yinjing City will be 3 years later. How do you know that you have to rush to Shanghai Pass? Wuzhong Shifang blinked his eyes. I'm afraid there are no more than 10 people in Yinjing City who know about this. The sword spirit of the Guei Palace is in a hurry to find us, the strongest among the famous sword-level sword wielder. What else could it be for? If you use your brain a little, you can guess it. Gahan filled the teacup in front of him again. I'm curious as to why my lord is in the sword pavilion. Could it be that my lord is going to ascend the throne? How dare you make fun of me? Wuzhong Shifang's tone was filled with anger, but his expression was full of smiles. Sword Immortal Tian Hung has left, so the sword pavilion naturally cannot be without a leader. Therefore, thanks to His Majesty Hao Tian's favor, the temporary sword pavilion of Yinjing City has fallen into my hands. After a few days, when Sword Immortal Tian Hung passes away, things should be settled. Congratulations in advance, my lord. Gahan cupped his hands at Wuzhong Shifang. Come on, I can't compare to you, the previous sword pavilion master of Yuzhong City. Wuzhong Shifang snatched his teapot from Gahan's hand and filled his cup. There are only a few minutes left until 8 o'clock. Hurry up and ask your friend to synchronize the sword niece. Turin, take the 2 ladies with you to synchronize the sword niece. Let them try what they want, but don't play any tricks, understand? Wuzhong Shifang said to the sword wielder who was kneeling at the door to stop Gahan. Although the sword wielder's face was disgusting as if he had eaten *T, he had no right to refuse because of Wuzhong Shifang's order. He could only take Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu to synchronize the sword niece. Gahan, do you remember that you once begged me to accept you as my disciple? After seeing Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu leave, Wuzhong Shifang suddenly mentioned this matter. Of course I remember. I will never forget this. Gahan's face stiffened, but he immediately returned to normal. Why did Wuzhong Shifang suddenly mention this? Does he want to accept me as his disciple again? However, today was different from that time. At that time, in order to save his life, Gahan naturally knelt in front of Wuzhong Shifang and begged him to accept him as his disciple. But now, Gahan's strength was comparable to a spirit sword level sword wielder, and he also had a good master like Lu Lei in China. How could he still want to be Wuzhong Shifang's disciple? And I also gave you a condition at that time, saying that as long as you can become the champion of the Octagon tournament, I will accept you as my disciple. Unexpectedly, you actually became the champion of the Octagon tournament today. Speaking of this, Wuzhong Shifang laughed even more happily. Sir, you must be joking. The last round of the Octagon tournament has not yet been held, and Yinjing City is only a few points away from us. How could this junior accept it? What if I become the champion of the Octagon tournament? The meaning of Gahan's words was very clear, which was to tell Wuzhong Shifeng that he no longer wanted to be Wuzhong Shifeng's disciple. That's not right. Just now, the organizing committee has already made a decision. The results of these 4 rounds will determine the winner, so you are already the well-deserved champion of the Octagon tournament. Wuzhong Shifeng once again drank the tea in the teacup in one gulp. Sir, at that time, it was different from the past. This junior no longer dares to bother Sir. In the future, Gahan will go on alone. There is no need for Sir to waste your energy. Gahan continued to refuse. Are you really not going to reconsider? Wuzhong Shifeng clenched his fists. As far as I know, Sword Immortal Yin Xiao may not last past next year. Without senior Yin Zhao suppression, those old guys in Yuzhong City are bound to make a scene. At that time, those old fellows in Yuzhong City will definitely cause a ruckus. If you don't have someone to support you, then I'm afraid you and your disciple won't be able to live so smoothly. It's just a position. What is it compared to the great cause of mankind? As long as everyone in Yuzhong City can work together, then this junior and this junior's disciple can even give up their buttocks. Guhan said with a hidden meaning. Good. Wuzhong Shifeng sighed. I'm afraid the biggest stupid thing I've done in my life was not accepting you as my disciple 3 months ago. Instead, it was Liu Lei who took advantage of it and obtained such a good successor. Sword Immortal Shifeng, you flatter me. This junior doesn't deserve it. Gahan bowed again. All right, since you don't want to be my disciple, then I'll make a deal with you. With a wave of Wuzhong Shifeng's hand, the teapot and teacups on the coffee table disappeared without a trace. Guhan, let me ask you, do you know what my Wuzhong Shifeng's ambition is? I do. Guhan's answer made Wuzhong Shifeng speechless. According to Wuzhong Shifeng's original plan, Gahan would definitely not know what he was thinking. Then, he could take the opportunity to talk and pull Gahan to his side. But when Guhan said that he knew, Wuzhong Shifeng didn't know how to continue. Ahem, then tell me, what is my ambition? At Sir's level, your greatest ambition is to become an emperor and become an emperor sword wielder. Gohan smiled and said, but this is a well-known ambition. You don't have to make me guess, so I guess your ambition must be something else. At this point, Guhan paused. For example, recreating Fusang. Chapter 838. Good, good, good. Wuzhong Shifeng said good 3 times in a row. Finally, he slammed the coffee table, shattering it into pieces. The younger generation will surpass the older in time. The younger generation will surpass us in time. I didn't expect that the greatest ambition of my Zhang Shifeng's life would actually come out of the mouth of an 18-year-old child. The younger generation will surpass us in time. The younger generation will surpass us in time. That's right. My greatest ambition in life is to take back Fusang Island that belongs to us and build the 9th base city of the human race, Fusang City, on Fusang Island. Wuzhong Shifeng looked at Gahan with glowing eyes. Gahan, are you willing to help me? Are you willing to help me build the greatest enterprise in the past hundreds of years? Let's talk about it later. Gahan did not reject Wuzhong Shifeng outright this time. Let's talk about it after you become the emperor. Otherwise, everything will be for naught. Of course. Then can you promise me that after I, Wuzhong Shifeng, ascend to the throne, you'll lend me a hand? Wuzhong Shifeng pressed on with his questions. While Gahan was about to answer the question, he heard an exclamation from the first floor. Gahan recognized the voice. It was the voice of Turin, who had been sent by Wuzhong Shifeng to lead the way for Liu Shihua. At this moment, the sword wielder screamed. Could it be that something had happened to Liu Shihua? What's going on? Wuzhong Shifeng stood up and went to the first floor to stand next to Turin. That man, that woman, that woman. Turin murmured for a long time before he finally said, that woman synchronized the double-winged angel swords. Phew! Guhan heaved a sigh of relief after hearing Turin's words. Although Liu Shihua had synchronized the double-winged angel swords in the game, there was still a possibility that it would fail in reality. Therefore, Gahan was still worried. Now, After hearing the confirmation from Turin, Guhan could finally put down his worries. What? It's actually the two-winged angel sword. Wuzhang Shifeng was also taken aback when he heard this name. As an immortal sword wielder, how could he not understand the meaning behind the double-winged angel sword? Wuzhang Shifeng immediately turned to look at Guhan. I finally understand why you insisted on giving the position of Sword Pavilion Master to an ordinary person, little friend Guhan. It seems like you already knew that this Lu Shihua could synchronize with the Sword of Angels, right? I don't lie in front of a real person. That's true. Guhan nodded and readily admitted this point. When the world heard the news, they all thought that you and old man Lu Lei in Yuzhong City had gone mad. Now it seems that we were all fooled by you. You're handing the Sword Pavilion over to an ordinary person. You're obviously handing it over to a Sword Emperor who's already a Sword Emperor. No matter what happens in the future, Yuzhong City will definitely have His Majesty Jindi. My young friend Guhan, you're destined to have another disciple of Jindi. Congratulations. When I see her later, should I address her as Your Majesty in advance? What's there to celebrate? What Her Majesty? At this moment, Gu Xuanwu ran out from a corner. Behind her was a fair-skinned, gentle-looking young lady. So it's the Iron Lady. Wuzhang Shifeng heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the young lady. It seemed like the other young lady that Guhan brought over did not have any amazing talent. She merely synchronized one of the three foundational genie swords, the Iron Lady. Wait, this sword lady doesn't seem to be an ordinary man-made sword lady. She's a natural sword lady. Wuzhang Shifeng took a closer look at the Iron Lady. Although her expression was calm, her eyes were filled with a lively light. It was clearly not the eyes of the dull man-made sword ladies. However, Wuzhang Shifeng vaguely remembered that the natural sword ladies of the three foundational sword ladies already had their own sword bearers. Turin, has the Iron Lady's natural sword lady returned to the Sword Pavilion? Turin asked behind Wuzhang Shifeng. Master Shifeng, the Iron Lady's original sword-bearer passed away yesterday due to old age. She was only sent back to the Sword Pavilion last night, Turin replied. My young friend Guhan, your friend is quite lucky. She came at the right time. Otherwise, she would have been snatched away by an ordinary person in a few days. Wuzhang Shifeng said with a smile. He was right. The reason they were called the three foundational sword maidens was naturally because they were the most easily coordinated sword maidens among all the ancient sword grade sword maidens. Whenever the three foundational sword ladies returned to the Sword Pavilion, many ordinary people would immediately fight to synchronize with them. Within a few days, they would find a new sword bearer. This was why Wuzhang Shifeng said that Gu Xianwu was quite lucky. If Gu Xianwu had come a few days later, the Iron Lady would have been synchronized away. Luckily, he only synchronized one foundational sword lady. I thought this Guhan had brought two geniuses with him. Wuzhang Shifeng thought to himself. If Gu Xianwu was destined to be a future genie like Lu Shihua, he would be so envious that he would vomit blood. Let's go. Let's continue. Gu Xianwu did not even look at Wuzhang Shifeng. He pulled on Turin's sleeve and urged him. What are you talking about? Continue what? Turin was confused. Didn't you synchronize with your ancient sword lady? But I don't have a treasured sword yet. I still need to synchronize with a treasured sword. Gu Xianwu said and dragged Turin to the second floor like a pig. Innate sword element, 1,000 quarks. Wuzhang Shifeng, who thought he was not envious, was envious again. It turned out that the second person Guhan had brought was a genius with more than 1,000 quarks of innate sword essence. Although it was not very rare, there were only one or two geniuses like this every year. Fortunately, one or two geniuses every year were still within the acceptable range of Wuzhang Shifeng. Wuzhang Shifeng himself had recruited quite a few geniuses with more than 1,000 quarks of innate sword essence. Gu Xianwu dragged Turin away. Not long after, Lu Shihua, who was followed by a two-winged angel in the air, returned to Guhan and Wuzhang Shifeng. Master, Lu Shihua respectfully bowed to Guhan, and then bowed to Wuzhang Shifeng, and then silently stood behind Guhan, acting as a human backdrop. That's great. Wuzhang Shifeng was filled with envy when he saw this. He had so many geniuses, but they could not compare to Jindi, who was destined to be a genius in the future. After that, Gahan and Wuzhang Shifeng seemed to have nothing to say. After a long silence, Gu Xianwu broke the silence. This time, there was another sword mistress behind Gu Xianwu. This sword maiden was dressed in a blue hanfu. She had a golden crown on her head and a pair of milky white stockings on her legs. She had a head of long blue hair and looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. She was a cute young lady who looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. This sword mistress is... When Gahan saw the girl's appearance, he immediately searched for the faces of treasured sword mistresses and finally found name. Is this sword mistress Xiao? Gahan pointed out the name of this sword mistress. I am Xiao Li. Greetings. Sword mistress Xiao Li nodded slightly at Gahan and the others. Her words and actions carried the demeanor of an emperor. She seemed to be a sword mistress of the way of the king. In fact, the beautiful sword was indeed a sword of the way of the king. Its original owner was the founding emperor of the Eastern Han dynasty, Lu Xiao. It was said that the sword was forged by Lu Xiao and his empress, Yinlihua. Therefore, the two characters in their names were used to name the sword, which was why it was called the Beautiful Sword. As a sword mistress of the way of the king, and a sword mistress of a heaven-defying son of the realm like Lu Xiao, Xiao Li's sword should have been a famous sword. But for some reason, Lu Xiao was considered the most low-key founding emperor. Moreover, this Xiao Li sword was mostly placed in the palace as an ornament after it was forged. Later on, it was buried with Lu Xiao and Yinlihua. Unexpectedly, the 3-foot sword of her predecessor, Liu Bang, the founding emperor of the Western Han dynasty, had a world-shaking legend like the White Snake Uprising. Naturally, it could only be ranked as a sword mistress of the sword pavilion. However, the beautiful sword was still very powerful among the treasured sword maidens. It was ranked 8th in the treasured sword record and could be considered as the number 1 treasured sword maiden in Yanjing City Sword Pavilion. Huh, not bad, not bad. Wuzhang Shifeng laughed dryly a few times. The 3 best treasured swords in the world were all in the Yuzhang Sword Pavilion. The Yanjing Sword Pavilion really didn't have many treasured swords that could be taken out. This Xiao Li sword was already the best sword mistress of the Sword Pavilion in Yanjing City. Who would have thought that the woman brought by Gahan would be able to coordinate with it? Wuzhang Shifeng's heart ached when he thought of this. All right. I think it's about time. Gahan, you should go to the sword committee and meet with the sword spirit of Gue Hall. Let's leave the sword pavilion together. Wuzhang Shifeng was afraid that if he stayed in the sword pavilion any longer, the sword mistress of the sword pavilion would be inexplicably coordinated away by someone else. However, in this world, what one was afraid of would happen. Therefore, Gu Xuanwu immediately said, "There's no hurry. I still want to go to the 3rd floor." Young lady, why do you want to go to the 3rd floor? That's where the sword mistresses of the famous sword mistresses are kept. Wuzhang Shifeng laughed dryly. Yes, it's precisely because that's where the sword mistresses of the famous sword mistresses are kept. That's why I want to go there. Gu Xuanwu laughed innocently. I still want to coordinate with the sword mistresses of the famous sword mistresses. If it wasn't for Wuzhang Shifeng's profound cultivation, he would have already collapsed in the sword pavilion. Chapter 839. In the end, when Gu Xuanwu appeared before Wuzhang Shifeng with her famous sword, the Tai sword, he was on the verge of breaking down. Although the 3-foot sword, which was ranked 1st in the famous sword record, had already been taken away by Lian Yinling, it was still a controlled object. Other than those who had been approved, no one else was allowed to touch it. Placing it in the sword pavilion was more like a symbol. As such, the Tai sword was the true number 1 sword maiden in the Swallow Sword Pavilion. The Tai sword was ranked 2nd in the famed swords record, and due to the fact that the 3-foot sword rarely appeared in the world, the Tai sword was the number 1 sword maiden by default. Originally, this Tai sword was prepared to be left to the young talents of Yanjing City, but who would have thought that it would end up in the hands of the people brought by Gahan? including the double-winged angel's sword and beautiful sword that had been lost before. In just an hour, Yanjing City Sword Pavilion had lost 3 top-notch innate sword ladies. How could Wu Zhangshi not have the urge to cry? Ahem, there are only 5 minutes left. We have to leave immediately. Gohan looked at the time and found that there were still 5 minutes before 8 p.m. Thus, he began to urge Wu Zhangshi to leave. Little friend Gohan, tell me the truth. What's your relationship with this girl? The girl Wu Zhangshi was referring to was naturally Gu Xuanwu. After all, everyone in the world knew about the relationship between Lu Shihua and Gohan, so there was nothing for him to ask. She's my cousin. Gohan rolled his eyes. She's called Gu Xuanwu, a distant cousin of mine. She's been clamoring to come to Yanjing City with me. I didn't expect that she would become a famous swordsman right after her birthday. Cousin, Wu Zhangshi pondered for a moment. Little friend Gohan, is Miss Gu Xuanwu suitable for marriage? Or does she have someone that she admires? Huh, it's like this. My son is about to turn 18. He's young and talented, but he hasn't found a suitable partner yet. I can see that my little friend Gohan has extraordinary talent and will definitely become a great person in the future. I wonder if we can become in-laws. Let Ms. Gu Xuanwu and my son spend more time together. We will be in-laws in the future. Wu Zhangshi said very seriously. Wu Zhangshi words almost caused Gohan to vomit blood. Wu Zhangshi actually wanted his own son to marry his own daughter. No, to marry Gu Xuanwu. It sounded very absurd, but on second thought, this Wu Zhangshi was really astute. He must have seen that he and Gu Xuanwu were both genius sword-bearers, so he felt that his family's bloodline was extraordinary. He wanted to use the Gu family's bloodline to improve his Wu Zhang family bloodline. More importantly, he and Gu Xuanwu were both strong and could become Emperor Sword-level sword-bearers in the future. Together with Lu Shihua, who would definitely become Jindi's sword-bearer, the future power of Gohan's family could already be foreseen to be terrifying. If Wu Zhangshi became in-laws with him, it would be equivalent to finding a huge backer for the Wu Zhang family in the future. Even if Wu Zhangshi could become an emperor, he was already almost 50 years old. He didn't have many more decades to live. The future would belong to young people like Gohan sooner or later. If Wu Zhangshi could receive the care of Gohan's family after he died, then the Wu Zhang family could still live for a few decades. This Wu Zhangshi was really thinking long-term. Well, Gohan seemed to be seriously thinking about this problem. I have always respected freedom of love. Love and marriage, let them decide for themselves. We shouldn't interfere. If your son and my cousin can get along and develop real feelings for each other, then it's not impossible to become in-laws. If both parties are not fated, then there's no need to force it. Yes, that's the logic. Wu Zhangshi nodded his head continuously. He was very confident in his son. He was a handsome young man who had captivated many girls in Yanjing City. He believed that it wouldn't be a problem for him to deal with Gu Xuanwu. After we go to Shanghai Pass, I'm afraid Gu Xuanwu will stay inside and never come out. Whether your son can see this girl is still a problem. What free love? Gohan thought indifferently. He didn't plan to let Gu Xuanwu fall in love with a human at all. However, if this girl really stays in Shanghai Pass forever, then there's a big problem. A bitter smile appeared on Gohan's face. This girl actually coordinated with the 3 important sword ladies at the same time. If she stays in Shanghai Pass forever, then wouldn't these 3 sword ladies be like pearls before swine, never to see the light of day? If that's the case, then wouldn't I be the sinner of humanity, causing humanity to lose 3 such important natural-born sword ladies? Thinking of this, Gohan began to hesitate. He didn't know how to deal with Gu Xuanwu. Should he let her stay in Shanghai Pass forever and never come out? Or should he let her abandon her identity as Yuan Ko and become a real human? This was indeed a question worth thinking about. Is everyone here? In the meeting room of the Sword Committee, the sword spirit of Gue Palace glanced at the famous swordsmen sitting on both sides of the meeting table. Among these people were Lin Yanling, Harry Chong-Ra, Andreevich, Leslie Dracula, and other outstanding young geniuses. There were also some older famous swordsmen present. These swordsmen were sitting on two sides. One side was occupied by young people, while the other side was occupied by old people. These people all had different emotions. The young sword-bearers all looked like they were eager to give it a try. They were clearly very confident in their own strength. They felt that their future was to survive in the midst of life and death, and that they were the protagonists of the entire world. They would definitely succeed and make a name for themselves in Shanghai Pass. On the other hand, the old swordsmen weren't as impulsive as the young swordsmen. Their faces were filled with fear. If it was possible, they would want to escape from this meeting room and not get involved in anything related to Shanghai Pass. Sir, there are only 2 people on your list who aren't here yet, a staff member standing next to the sword spirit of Guay Palace said. As the staff member was about to report the names of the 2 missing swordsmen, the sword spirit of Guay Palace waved his hand and said, "There's no need to say it. I can already tell who they are. I didn't expect some people to think that they're the best in the world and boast so arrogantly. I didn't expect them to become deserters. They don't even have the courage to come to this meeting room. What are you going to do to me if I don't come?" The door of the meeting room was pushed open. Gahan walked into the meeting room. However, Gu Xuanwu and Wu Zhang Shifeng were following behind Gahan. "The rules of the Sword Committee will deal with you." The sword spirit of Guay Palace glared at him and said in a deep voice, "You don't have to use these rules to scare me. When our Yuzhong city was under attack, I didn't see the rules of the Sword Committee, nor did I see any help." Guhan retorted without hesitation. The rules of the Sword Committee had a strong binding force, because only cities that abided by the rules could receive free assistance from other cities organized by the Sword Committee when they were attacked. If the city didn't follow the rules, the city would be punished and lose a lot of benefits. Therefore, almost every city respected the rules and orders of the Sword Committee. However, 2 months ago, Yuzhong City and the Sword Committee had become enemies. Both sides didn't trust each other anymore. When Yuzhong City was under attack, the Sword Committee did not do a good job. Apart from Yinjing City and 3 other cities that sent reinforcements to Yuzhong City, the other cities didn't send any reinforcements. This was especially true for the city of London, where the sword spirit of Hades belonged. It was said that the reinforcements were lost in the Pacific Ocean after drifting for a month. As for whether the city of London sent reinforcements, only God knew. Moreover, Long Shi Jindi, who was responsible for restraining Mountain Paradise, had actually retreated at the critical moment. As a result, Hao Qian Jindi, who had come from afar, had been threatened by Jehovah and didn't dare to come close to Yuzhong City for reinforcements. Because of this, Gahan looked down on Long Shi Jindi. Of course, Guhan didn't dare to openly say that he no longer abided by the rules of the Sword Committee. Otherwise, if he really broke off the relationship with the Sword Committee, Yuzhong City, which would lose all the immortal sword bearers, would definitely suffer a great loss when facing the next wave of Yuan Ko's attack. Let me explain on behalf of Gahan. His cousin just coordinated with the sword lady in Yinjing City's sword pavilion. She wasted a little time, so she was a little late. I, Wu Zhang Shifeng, will take responsibility for this matter. You don't have to blame Gahan. In order to please Gahan, Wu Zhang Shifeng took the initiative to take responsibility for this matter. However, it wasn't a big deal. They were just a few minutes late. After hearing Wu Zhang Shifeng's words, even the sword spirit of Guay Palace was too embarrassed to say anything else. He could only bow stiffly to Wu Zhang Shifeng. Then, the other famous sword-level swordsman came to a sudden realization and bowed to Wu Zhang Shifeng, the sword spirit of Guay Palace. After getting Gahan and Gu Xuanwu to sit down, the sword spirit of Guay Palace said in a low voice, "I believe that in the past 2 hours, everyone has learned why I gathered everyone here through various channels. If anyone doesn't know, then I will tell them directly that Shanghai Pass can't hold on any longer. Just 2.5 hours ago, the Shanghai Pass headquarters sent an urgent report to the Sword Committee. The remaining tribes of the Wu people suddenly attacked the Sun Star, the great Zhou Star banner, as if they had gone crazy. Since the famous sword-level swordsmen have suffered heavy losses, The famous sword-level swordsmen guarding the Sun Star's main star are severely lacking in manpower. So far, two of the main stars, the Great Zhou Tian star banners, have fallen. 6 famous sword-level swordsmen and hundreds of ancient sword-level swordsmen have died on the spot. If this battle continues, I'm afraid that by noon tomorrow, the Sun star formation will collapse. Once that happens, the entire Zhou Tian star's star battle formation will collapse. When that happens, I don't need to tell you what kind of fate humans will suffer. Therefore, according to the Sword Committee's emergency meeting, after the meeting ends at 8:30, everyone is to immediately take the Sword Committee's Super Maglev sports car to Shanghai Pass. You must arrive at Shanghai Pass before 8 o'clock tomorrow morning to support the Sun Star's star battle formation and kill all the damn Wu people's tribes. Just as Gahan had predicted, the Shanghai Pass battlefield was in great danger. Chapter 840. Leaving at 8:30? Isn't that a little too hasty? A middle-aged famed swordsman stood up from his seat. Although his legs were trembling, he still managed to stand up. I've just returned from outside the city, and I haven't even had the chance to spend some time with my parents and wife. Can I take a day off and set off tomorrow night? At least let us accompany our loved ones. This might be our last time. No. Before the swordsman could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by the sword spirit of Guay Hall. Shanghai Pass won't last past noon tomorrow. If I allow you to reunite with your loved ones today, everyone here will die at the hands of the 12 Zhu Wu in a few days. I don't need to waste my breath on which is more important. After hearing the sword spirit's words, the swordsman could only helplessly sit back down. The sword spirit was right. If Shanghai Pass couldn't be defended, then Yinjing City, which was the closest to Shanghai Pass, would definitely be the first to bear the brunt. The 12 Zhu Wu, who had been accumulating anger for hundreds of years, would definitely target Yinjing City for revenge. If Yinjing City fell, then everyone's families and relatives would not be able to survive. That's right. Even if it's for your loved ones, you can't back down this time. A very majestic and heroic voice sounded from the door. Everyone turned their heads and saw a man wearing a red and yellow robe with a 5-clawed golden dragon and a red-browed baihu embroidered on it walk in. Greetings, your majesty Long Sure. When they saw this person, all the swordsmen present, including the sword spirit, Gahan, and the 10-direction sword immortal, knelt on one knee in front of this person. However, there was one person who didn't kneel, and that was Gu Xuanwu. This child had never seen Long Sure Jindi's photo before, so he naturally didn't know that this man was one of the 2 Jindis, Long Sure Jindi. However, even if Gu Xuanwu knew this, he probably wouldn't kneel. After all, he had grown up with Yuan Ko and didn't have the slightest bit of respect for Jindi. Gu Xuanwu didn't kneel, and the 3 sword ladies behind him, Bai Tai, Xiuli, and Taifen naturally didn't kneel as well. In reality, none of the sword ladies present knelt. There was not much of a hierarchy between the sword ladies. Even if an ancient sword lady met an emperor sword lady, as long as they did not like her, they would not even bother with her, much less kneel. Ha! Rise! Rise! Long Sure Jindi didn't seem to mind this at all. He hastily beckoned all the sword-bearers present to get up, and then sat down on the seat of the sword spirit of the Guay Palace. I came all the way here to see the finals of the 8 Academies tournament, and to see what young talents we humans have in the future. Long Sure Jindi had an amiable look on his face as he said, but I didn't expect to hear such bad news as soon as I arrived in Yinjing City. It seems that I won't have the opportunity to see the grand occasion of the Elite 8 Academies tournament. Since I won't be able to see the finals of the 8 Academies tournament, then let me give all the young talents a grand farewell. This trip to Shanghai Pass is bound to be full of dangers, and any of you may be left there forever. I also stayed in Shanghai Pass for 3 years, and I know better than you what the situation in Shanghai Pass is like. It is a dangerous place, and even more so, a dangerous place. Injuries are commonplace, and death is also rare. I don't know how many of you will be able to appear in front of me again when you return 3 years later. This is really the greatest sorrow of my human race. I had no choice but to throw the elite geniuses to that place generation after generation, and then watch them die helplessly. If I could, I would like to tear down that Shanghai Pass and break that Zhoutian Star Great Array so that my human race will never be burdened by Shanghai Pass again and again. But I am incompetent. I can't do it. My greatest ability is to offer you a cup of booze. After saying that, a few drops of tears rolled down from the corner of the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor's eyes. It could be seen that this was not Longsure Jindi's acting, but his true feelings. Longsure Jindi admittedly had his selfish side, but when it came to major issues of right and wrong, Longsure Jindi was still deeply righteous. Longsure Jindi clearly knew that, apart from those middle-aged and elderly swordsmen, these children in front of him, who had become famous swordsmen at the age of 18, were all among the best geniuses of the human race. This was probably the most powerful wave of geniuses of the human race in the last 100 years. Among this wave of geniuses, it was very likely that the future Sword Immortal and Jindi would appear. If I throw a group of geniuses like you into Shanghai Pass, how many of you can come back alive? I really don't know. If some of you die in Shanghai Pass, whether that person will be able to become Jindi and Sword Immortal in the future, I also don't know. But I do know one thing. Shanghai Pass can kill geniuses, but it can also temper them. Among you, 1 or 2 geniuses with the talent of Sword Immortal and Jindi may die. But there will be 3 or 4 Jindi and Sword Immortals who have been tempered between life and death. If you can survive these 3 years, then your future will be bright, and human beings will be proud of you. At this point, Longsure Jindi's mood had brewed to the extreme. With a wave of his hand, dozens of void gates unexpectedly appeared at the same time, and then from each void gate came out an ordinary blue-rimmed bowl, which was already filled with fragrant wine. Come, everyone, drink this cup of wine. I assure you that after 3 years, I will still be here waiting for you to welcome you. Longsure Jindi raised the blue-rimmed bowl in front of him. Infected by Longsure Jindi's imposing manner, even those middle-aged and elderly swordsmen, who were originally somewhat afraid at this moment, were full of courage and raised their blue-rimmed bowls. As a result, everyone raised their blue-rimmed bowls high, and the whole scene looked like the scene of 108 generals of Liangshan Pass holding a meeting, shouting to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. However, there were still some incongruous things in this scene, such as the Gu Xuanwu. To be reasonable, even a fool would know that it was necessary to wait for Longsure Jindi to finish drinking before the others could drink this bowl of wine. But our eldest, Miss Gu Xuanwu, did not understand this. But even if she did, she certainly would not care about it. To be reasonable, our eldest Miss Gu Xuanwu was still a good child, and had never drunk wine in her life. Therefore, seeing this bowl of fragrant liquid, eldest Miss Gu Xuanwu could not resist the temptation. When everyone raised their blue-rimmed bowls high, eldest Miss Gu Xuanwu began to gulp the wine down her throat. However, although this wine smelled very fragrant, it was actually not the same when it was drunk. After the eldest Miss Gu Xuanwu gulped down the first mouthful, her cheeks swelled up and instantly became red. Puchi, eldest Miss Gu Xuanwu unceremoniously sprayed out the white wine in her mouth. Fortunately, Gahan, who was standing in front of Gu Xuanwu, had sharp eyes and quick hands. The sword chi in his hand curled up and wrapped all the liquid with his sword chi, and finally threw the whole sword chi out of the window. An unfortunate passerby outside the window thought that it was raining and quickly covered himself with his hands. When he came back to his senses, he found that he was already reeking of wine, and when he returned home, he was severely reprimanded by his wife. Seeing a lovely girl suddenly making this action, the present swordsman finally couldn't help but smile, put down the blue-rimmed bowls in their hands, and began to laugh. It was unknown how Longsure Jindi felt when he saw this scene, but Jindi, after all, was Jindi, and certainly could not lower himself to the level of a little girl. Therefore, Longsure Jindi could only put down the blue-rimmed bowl in his hands with a gentle smile on his face, looked at Gu Xuanwu with interest, and asked with a smile, "Little girl, which city are you from? What's your name?" "My name is Before Gu Xuanwu had time to speak, she was interrupted by Gahan. "Your Majesty, she is this junior's cousin. She dropped out of school when she was a child and has no experience, so she was somewhat impetuous. I hope your Majesty can forgive her." So it turns out to be the cousin of Pavilion Master Gahan. Longsher Jindi could not recognize other swordsmen, but this Gahan, who had fought against him in the Chanyang Mountain and finally kept the Xian Yuan sword, was something that Longsher Jindi could not recognize. Longsher Jindi's gaze swept over Gu Xuanwu, and then he was stunned to see the three sword ladies behind Gu Xuanwu. Except for the white iron sword, which was not worth mentioning, whether it was the beautiful sword or the Tai sword, they were all top sword ladies ranked in the top 10. It seems that this boy's family bloodline is not ordinary. Longsher Jindi, like Wuzhang Shifang, began to praise the bloodline of Patriarch Gahan. He was well aware of Gahan's strength. He possessed the number 1 treasure sword, the Heavenly Sword, and the Juzi sword, which appeared for the first time in front of the world. Gahan had already reported the news of the Juzi sword to the Sword Committee General Headquarters, and the Sword Committee General Headquarters also learned that after the ancient sword Lady Qingpin's sword, Gahan actually had another famous sword, the Juzi sword, which appeared for the first time in the world. Moreover, looking at the data of the Juzi sword, it could already suppress the 1-meter sword and the Tai sword and become the number 1 sword lady of the famous sword grade. It was said that the Sword Committee General Headquarters had already sent a note to the famous Sword Records Compilation Committee. When the next edition of the famous sword record was released, the second place would not be the original Tai sword, but the Juzi sword. Everyone might find it strange. Wasn't the data of the Juzi sword the number 1 sword lady of the famous sword grade? How could it be tied for second place? Was it because the Juzi sword only surpassed the 1-meter sword in terms of attributes? But who made the 1-meter sword be the sword lady of the people's path? And it had the power of the entire human race behind it. As long as the 1-meter sword was willing, it could even suppress the number 1 sword lady of the spirit sword grade. Therefore, the position of the number 1 sword lady of the famous sword grade could only be placed on the head of the 1-meter sword. Sword Spirit of the Gue Palace. Is Miss Gu Xuanwu's name on the list? Longsher Jindi suddenly asked the Sword Spirit of the Gue Palace beside him. Your Majesty, because Miss Gu Xuanwu became a famous sword grade swordsman 10 minutes ago, she is not listed on the list, the Sword Spirit of the Gue Palace replied. Then add her name. Longsher Jindi nodded. Such a small number of people is still a bit tight for the Shanghai Pass. But now, with the appearance of the Tai sword, the strength of the Shanghai Pass can be greatly strengthened. For the safety of the human race, the little girl still has to make a sacrifice. Chapter 841. Unexpectedly, with just a few words, Longsher Jindi had included Gu Xianwu in the list of famous sword bearers who were going to support Shanghai Pass. Regarding this, Gahan couldn't say that he opposed it, but he also couldn't say that he agreed with it. The reason why he didn't oppose it was that regardless of whether Longsher Jindi allowed Gu Xianwu to join this operation or not, Gu Xianwu would eventually go to Shanghai Pass. Therefore, Longsher Jindi's behavior was meaningless. The reason why he didn't agree was that Gu Xianwu's identity would become more troublesome. Now, everyone knew that Gu Xianwu was going to Shanghai Pass with Gahan. If Gu Xianwu inexplicably disappeared in Shanghai Pass and couldn't come back, it was bound to arouse some speculations. Of course, these speculations were not without solutions. Gahan only needed to find an opportunity to make Gu Xianwu pretend to be dead. But in this way, Gahan would need to bring back all of Gu Xianwu's sword ladies. Cutting off the sword mark between Gu Xianwu and his sword ladies would become a huge problem. Well, there were still 3 years left. Gahan was also too lazy to think about these things. The boat would naturally straighten out when it came to the bridgehead. After being interrupted by Gu Xianwu, Longsher Jindi was embarrassed to make everyone drink together like before. Therefore, the imposing manner that the sword-bearers had summoned with great difficulty relaxed again. After Longsher Jindi said a few words of encouragement, It was already 8:30 p.m. It was time for everyone to set off. But at this time, the door of the conference room was pushed open again. This time, it was the aggressive, sword immortal Tian Sun who came in. Behind him were two old men with 5 scabbards. Obviously, these two old men were also sword immortals of Yinjing City. Sword spirit of Ming Palace. What do you mean by this? What right do you have to snatch people from the hands of our Yinjing City? Sword immortal Tian Sun asked the sword spirit of Ming Palace as soon as he came in. What's the matter? What's with all this noise? Long Shi Jiandi coldly said. At this time, sword immortal Tian Sun was surprised to find that Long Shi Jiandi was actually in this conference room. Your Majesty, Dragon Shi, what are you doing here? Sword immortal Sky Sun asked in disbelief. Aren't you supposed to arrive tomorrow? I heard that Shanghai Pass is in danger, so I deliberately sped up my journey and directly used the Void Gate to come to Yinjing City. I want to meet these young talents who are about to go to Shanghai Pass and say a few words of encouragement. Can I do that? Do I still need to consult you? Sword immortal Heavenly Sun? Long Shi Jiandi's expression was somewhat sullen. I wouldn't dare. Sword immortal Heavenly Sun had no choice but to bow his head. But after all, this was his territory in Yinjing City, not to mention that Hao Yin Jiandi was also in Yinjing City. Therefore, Sword immortal Heavenly Sun was not inferior to Long Shi Jiandi in nature. He raised his head and asked Long Shi Jiandi with bright and piercing eyes, "It is naturally not a problem for your Majesty to encourage these young heroes. But dare I ask your Majesty, what if there is a murderer among these young heroes?" Murderer? What murder? Is there a murderer among them? Long Shi Jiandi didn't know anything. Of course there is. He is not only a murderer, but also a murderer who killed a sword-bearer, and also killed our Yinjing City. Enough. I know about this matter, and I don't need you to remind me. Long Shi Jiandi rudely interrupted Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun's words. I am clear about this matter. He is not the murderer. On the contrary, he was seriously wounded by Sword Immortal Tianhen at the first moment, and during the whole process, he didn't even touch Tianhen. How could he have killed the person? Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun, it is best to think carefully before using the word murderer. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun choked for a moment. In fact, in his heart, how could he not understand that Ku Rakin was just an unlucky bastard that Yinjing City used to vent its anger? At best, Ku Rakin's crimes were jailbreak and robbery. The hat of a murderer could not be placed on Ku Rakin's head. However, Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun didn't want to admit it just like that. He could only continue. Your Majesty, your words are incorrect. If it weren't for that Ku Rakin bringing Yuan Ko into Yinjing City, how could Yuan Ko have killed Sword Immortal Tianhen? Although it wasn't Ku Rakin himself who did it, that Yuan Ko was brought in by Ku Rakin. Ku Rakin is the main culprit of this matter, and he is undoubtedly the murderer. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun's words were not unreasonable. It was like raising a dog. Now that this dog had bitten someone, would it be you or the dog that had to pay for it? Of course it would be you. Otherwise, you would be worse than a dog. Sword Immortal Tianhen's death was still under the control of the Spirit Sword Grade and above swordbearers. Therefore, most of the famed sword grade swordbearers present had no idea what had happened. As the conversation between Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun and Long Shi Jiandi gradually deepened, the other famed sword grade swordbearers gradually understood what had happened. Then, expressions of horror appeared on their faces. What? Sword Immortal Tianhen is dead? What? Sword Immortal Tianhen was killed by Yuan Ko, who was brought in by Ku Rakin. Apart from the dozen or so geniuses who had participated in the Octagon tournament, most of the famed sword grade swordbearers present were from Yinjing City. After all, the practitioner's time limit was only 2 hours. Apart from the famed sword grade swordbearers in Yinjing City, the sword spirit of Guai Palace couldn't summon famed sword grade swordbearers from other cities. Therefore, when the famed sword grade swordbearers present heard this shocking news, they couldn't help but become restless. Some of them even began to pull out their swords and look around the conference room with vicious eyes, trying to find a famed sword-grade sword-bearer called Ku Rakin, who is currently in the conference room. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun. What's going on? Could it be that the Yin Jing city sword-bearers want to compete with me in swordsmanship? Long Shirt Jindy saw this scene and immediately seized the opportunity to pressure Sword Immortal Heavenly Sunday. How dare you? How dare you show your swords in front of His Majesty? Put away your swords. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun didn't hesitate and immediately vented his anger on these famed sword-grade sword-bearers who couldn't see the situation clearly. Under his scolding, these famed sword-grade sword-bearers could only reluctantly put their swords back into their scabbards. Your Majesty, Heavenly Sun, dare I ask, do you really not care about the face of the tens of thousands of sword-bearers in our Yanjing city and want to forcibly shield such a murderer? Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun asked. I'm not shielding him. On the contrary, I am doing this for your Yanjing city. Long Shirt Jindy coldly snorted. Shanghai Pass is in a critical situation and urgently needs a large number of genius-famed sword-grade sword-bearers. That Ku Rakin was able to become a famed sword-grade sword-bearer within a year, synchronized with the king of Yuzgojian's sword, and is also the direct descendant of Sword Immortal White Colt. I am not unconditionally exonerating or shielding him. I have already issued an imperial decree that it is enough for others to fight in Shanghai Pass for 3 years, but he, Ku Rakin, must fight in Shanghai Pass for a full 30 years. If he does not die within 30 years, then I will pardon his sins and let him come out with a clean record. Long Shirt Jindy let out a long sigh. But this is 30 years. Not to mention that the probability of him surviving within these 30 years is less than 5%. This is the most glorious 30 years of his life. For him to waste it in this hopeless situation of Shanghai Pass is already the greatest punishment. Is this not enough? Actually, I want to give Shanghai Pass a chance, give Yanjing City a chance, give this kid a chance, and, at the same time, give Sword Immortal White Colt, who sacrificed himself for humanity, a chance. Let him atone for his crimes in Shanghai Pass. Even if he dies, he should die on the battlefield against Yuan Ko, rather than wasting our human bullets. I remember that when you were young, Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun, you and Sword Immortal White Colt were teammates for a few years, and were even sworn brothers. Could it be that you are going to helplessly watch Sword Immortal White Colt's last bloodline be severed? These 2 paragraphs of Long Shirt Jindy's previous tough style were replaced with a touch of gentleness. Just as Long Shirt Jindy had said, fighting in Shanghai Pass for 30 years was indeed more painful than death. From a purely criminal point of view, it was no less than a death sentence. In comparison, letting Ku Rakin fight in Shanghai Pass was indeed more practical than simply wasting bullets. In addition, Ku Rakin's father, Zhu Wudao, had perished together with the Creator's Godhead for the sake of humanity. He had used his own life to prevent the Creator's Godhead from exploding, thus saving the lives of 3,000 Yuzhong City's elite sword-bearers. With such a meritorious deed bestowed upon Ku Rakin, no matter how one looked at it, his punishment should be reduced. But Tianhen was also a hero of our Yanjing city, yet he was killed by Yuan Ko for no reason at all. If we let Ku Rakin off just like that, Tianhen's spirit in heaven. It was clear that Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun still didn't want to let Ku Rakin off just like that. Senior Heavenly Sun, I hope you can watch this video about this matter. The sword spirit of Gue Hall, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. Then, everyone heard a crisp sound from Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun's personal terminal. I've sent the video to you. I think this video will clearly prove who killed Sword Immortal Tianhen. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun closed his eyes. Clearly, he was directly using his brain to read the video on his personal terminal. About 2 to 3 minutes later, the video finished playing, and Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun opened his eyes again. However, this time, Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun's eyes were no longer filled with anger. Instead, there was a hint of doubt. That's impossible. Tianhen's immortal-grade sword mistress has already fallen into a deep slumber. How could she appear in the video and describe what happened during the battle? It turned out that Sword Immortal Heavenly Son was watching a video of Sword Immortal Tian Hin's Immortal Grade Sword Mistress. In the video, Sword Immortal Tian Hin's Sword Mistress very clearly described how Sword Immortal Tian Hin had fought Zhu Luren, how he had defeated Sha Sha, and the fact that if he had tried to devour Sha Sha's divinity, he would have died to the divinity. This was because Sword Immortal Tian Hin would never lie about something as important as this. Therefore, if this was really what Sword Immortal Tian Hin's Immortal Greatsword Mistress had said, then it could be confirmed that this was the truth. However, the problem was that Sword Immortal Tian Hin was already dead, and all of his sword mistresses had fallen into a deep slumber. How could this video have been recorded? Chapter 842. Senior Sky Son, this video definitely has something to do with me. The Saintess of Jerusalem, Ashma, who had been sitting among the sword-bearers without saying a word, stood up and said, "There is someone that Ashma can't refuse. You want me to do him a small favor by using my ancient sword Maiden sword to summon a sword Maiden in her previous state." After hearing Ashma's explanation, Sword Immortal Sky Son finally understood. It turned out that the Sword Maiden in the video wasn't the real Sword Maiden. Instead, it was the Sword Maiden that Ashima had summoned using her ancient sword Maiden Sword Maiden. It was the Sword Maiden that had experienced the entire battle a few days ago. Therefore, even though the real Sword Maiden of Sword Immortal Tian Hin was still asleep in the Sword Tower, Ashma could still appear in front of the camera to record the video and tell the truth. At the same time, because this Sword Maiden was summoned by the Sword Maiden, the possibility of her lying was directly reduced to zero. This was because the Sword Maiden summoned by the Sword Maiden basically had zero EQ. Even if you ordered her to lie, she would not speak. She would only tell the truth about her memories. Therefore, the Sword Maiden in the video was definitely telling the truth. There was no way she could fake it. No wonder the staff of the Sword Tower told me 3 days ago that a sword bearer from Cold City had entered the Sword Tower, but left without doing anything. So it was you, Ashma, who entered the Sword Tower to see Sword Immortal Tian Hin's Sword Maiden, so that you could use the Sword Maiden to summon her past life. Wuzhang Shifeng added, if the Sword Maiden wanted to summon the past life of the Sword Maiden, she had to see her real body with her own eyes. Therefore, Ashma had to make a trip to the Sword Tower. Wuzhang Shifeng's words also indirectly prove the truth of this matter. I'm very curious. Who is so important that the Saintess of Jerusalem personally came to save such a person? Sword Immortal Sky Son asked Ashma with a gloomy expression. I'm sorry, Senior Sky Son. I can't tell you the answer. Ashma shook her head through the veil and sat back down. I know even if you don't tell me. Sword Immortal Sky Son glanced at Long Shi Jindi and the sword spirit of the Gue Hall. Obviously, he believed that these two were the mysterious people who had asked Ashma to help, because only these two people had the face to ask the Holy Maiden of Jerusalem to help them hide their identities. If that's the case, then Yinjing City has nothing to say. Although Sword Immortal Tian Hin's death had a lot to do with Ku Rakin, since he was willing to fight for 30 years in Shanghai Pass to atone for his crimes, then Yinjing City is not willing to waste this bullet. With that, Sword Immortal Sky Son left in a hurry with his men. As for Ku Rakin, who had always been a topic of conversation between the two of them, he had never appeared, and no one knew where he was. Father, why did you speak up for Ku Rakin today? Why did you ask me to send people from the Shanghai Pass Dispatching Bureau to forcefully take Ku Rakin away in your name? Why did you do that? After all the sword bearers had left the conference room, the sword spirit of Gue Palace, who had been cooperating with Long Shi Jindi, suddenly asked. It seemed that the sword spirit of Gue Palace had received orders from Long Shi Jindi not long ago to take Ku Rakin away. Little White, Long Shi Jindi let out a long sigh. Then, he gently stroked the head of the sword spirit of Gue Palace with his big hands. When the sword spirit heard the words Little White, he couldn't help but tremble. Obviously, he hated this name. Little White, what do you think of your father as a person? What's wrong with being Jindi? Long Shi Jindi asked. Bad-tempered, selfish, moody, mean, and ungrateful. The sword spirit of Gue Palace bluntly pointed out Long Shur Jindi's shortcomings, causing Long Shur Jindi's face to be filled with embarrassment. Enough! How can you talk about your father like that? Long Shur Jindi forcibly interrupted the sword spirit of Gue Palace and then sighed with emotion. But what you said is also the truth. Because of my temperament, your father isn't good in the hearts of others. They don't like me, and some even hate me. Although you have belittled your father and made me worthless, how can your temperament be good? At that time, I strongly opposed you entering the Shanghai Pass Dispatching Bureau, but you insisted on squeezing your way in. In the past 3 years, you have almost offended all the talented youths of a younger generation. Among these talented youths, there are bound to be future sword immortals and Jindi. What do you think your future will be like? Long Shur Jindi silently spoke while the sword spirit of Gue Palace silently listened. At this time, the two of them looked like a pair of father and son. I'm not young anymore. It might be 30 years or 20 years. I will eventually ascend. But at that time, you will still be young, and the descendants of our family will be even younger. If those future sword immortals and Jindi have the intention to retaliate against you, what do you think will happen to you? At that time, I will also be a sword immortal Jindi. I don't need to be afraid of them. The sword spirit of Gue Palace coldly responded. No, you can't become a sword immortal, and you can't become a Jindi. All of this has already been predestined. You know this better than me. As Long Shur Jindi said this, his whole person showed a kind of miserable feeling. From the time you're 3 years old, I knew that you were destined to be a spirit sword level swordsman. That's not what you said at that time. You told me that I was destined to be a famous sword level swordsman for my whole life. However, didn't I still use my own strength to become a spirit sword level swordsman? Why do you think that I can't become a sword immortal? Why do you say that I can ascend the throne and become an emperor? The sword spirit of Gue Palace's emotions suddenly erupted as he loudly questioned Long Shur Jindi. Did you really rely on your own strength? Long Shur Jindi strangely glared at the sword spirit of Gue Palace. The sword spirit of Gue Palace avoided Long Shur Jindi's eyes with a guilty expression that he had never shown before. You are playing with fire. Wuzhong Shifeng is also playing with fire, and some people are also playing with fire. I don't know whether the fire will burn me or not, but I know that if the fire really burns you, without Jindi's help, you will undoubtedly die, just like that arrogant Tian Hen. Our family will also end up like the heaven-shrouding family, because of people like you. The dignified heaven-shrouding Jindi's descendant actually ended up worse than a dog, living like an animal. But the heaven-shrouding family can at least live like animals. But whether our Long Shur family can still exist in this world is still a problem. Even if I die without a corpse, I still have to do this. The sword spirit stubbornly straightened his back. Dying is better than being a dog. Then go ahead and do it. Otherwise, why do you think I did this when I clearly saw through all your plans and even pushed Anna into the fire pit? Now, I don't even know if she's dead or alive. Long Shur Jindi patted the shoulder of the sword spirit of Gue Palace. Don't worry and do it. I have already asked for a favor from you. A future Jindi has already promised me that no matter what kind of crime you commit, he will protect your life. At the very least, he will protect our family's bloodline. So don't worry and do it. I have already paved the way for you. Dad, are you crazy? Even that lunatic Wuzhong Shifeng doesn't dare to say that he can ascend to the throne in the future. How can you say that you will get a favor from a future Jindi? The sword spirit of Gue Palace asked in confusion. You don't have to worry about this. Dad said that the future Jindi is the future Jindi. In fact, Dad is also looking forward to it. If you really succeed, then our Long Shur family will be immortal. Then Dad, why don't you join us? The sword spirit of Gue Palace looked at his father. If you're willing to join us, then our plan will be even more guaranteed. I can't join you. Long Shur Jindi shook his head. I am Jindi, the last pillar of humanity. I will never join a plan that uses the future of humanity as an experiment. Don't forget that the Leonian family is secretly controlling everything. I even suspect that your plan has been completely grasped by the Leonian family. What? We are obviously very secretive. It is impossible for the Leonian family to know. For the first time, the sword spirit of Gue Palace showed an expression of fear. It was as if the Leonian family represented a terrifying monster. Didn't you also hide it from me? But didn't I know everything about your plan? Longsure Ginny smiled. Even I can understand your plan, let alone the Leonian family that has been operating in this world for 1,000 years. Don't think that you can hide anything from them. You're just burying your head in the sand. Then what should we do? The sword spirit of Gue Palace started trembling in fear. If the Leonian family tries to stop us, then I'm afraid we will all. What are you worried about? If the Leonian family really wanted to stop you, they would have done it long ago. Why would they wait until now? You have already completed half of your plan? Ginny rubbed his son's head. Don't worry. The Leonian family is also looking forward to change. Perhaps they are disgusted with the 1,000 years of stagnation. They also want to know if humans can truly be freed after your plan succeeds. They want to be freed from the 1,000 years of endless battles and return to the happy era of exams and work. When Gahan and the others came out of the white Jing of the Sword Committee headquarters, there was already a large maglev bus waiting in the parking lot of the white Jing. This bus was obviously prepared for Gahan and the other famous sword bearers. After leaving the white Jing, they boarded the bus and went straight to Shanghai Pass. They did not even stop for a moment. This bus seemed to be similar to the Eagle Cat Sword Spirits bus. There were individual doors in the bus, and each door led to an individual room. However, it was different from the Eagle Cat Sword Spirits maglev bus that Gahan had taken before. The Eagle Cat Sword Spirits bus was similar to an RV modified. There were no changes in the space. However, these two buses had a space folding system, just like Guhan's droplet flying car. It looked like a small door, but when it opened, it revealed a large room that was about 30 square meters. There were 25 such large rooms in the 20-meter-long maglev bus. Thank you. When Gahan opened a room with his name written on it, he saw a shiny bald head in front of him. Chapter 843. In Guhan's memory, this should be the first time in history that Zhu Luren bowed to him to express his gratitude. At least, this arrogant teenager was not stupid. He knew who had secretly helped him out of the prison where he would surely die. Don't thank me so quickly. Wait until you walk out of Shanghai Pass alive in 30 years. Gahan waved his hand and looked at Ku Rakin's bald head. What happened to your hair? Could be those guys from Yinjing City. No, I just shaved it off myself. Ku Rakin touched his bald head subconsciously. I will grow my hair again when I meet my Shasha again. Boring, Gahan said, and sat on a bed with his name written on it. Gahan noticed that there were a total of 4 beds in this room. It seemed like 4 people would be sleeping in this room tonight. In addition to Jules Vren, who was already here, 2 more people would join this room. Soon, Gahan knew who they were. Harry Changrua and Andreevich walked in side by side. It seemed like they were Gahan's temporary roommates tonight. Sir Gahan. Harry Changrua jumped up in surprise when he saw Gahan in the room. He wanted to get intimate with Gahan, but was stopped by Gahan. Your bed is over there. Gahan said calmly. Wait, why are there 5 people in this room? Andreevich, who had never spoken to Gahan, looked around the room and was surprised to find that there was a 5th person in the room where there should only be 4 people. The 5th person was naturally none other than the extra Gu Xuanwu. My cousin joined us temporarily, so the sword spirit didn't arrange a room for her. She could only stay with me. Gahan's words seemed reasonable, but in fact, the sword spirit had sent a message to Gahan to inform Gahan that the sword spirit had arranged a room for Gu Xuanwu in Liu Yinling's room. However, how could Gahan let Gu Xuanwu stay in another room? Who knew if this girl, who knew little about the human world, would say something strange to Liu Yinling and expose Gahan's secret? However, since Gu Xuanwu had appeared in front of everyone as a human, Gahan couldn't force her into his dimensional pocket. In the end, Gahan had no choice but to let Gu Xuanwu lie on the same bed as him and use this method to control Gu Xuanwu's big mouth. As Gahan's words made sense, Andreevich didn't question it anymore. If Gahan observed Andreevich's eyes carefully, he would realize that there was something wrong with them. He looked at Gu Xuanwu as though there was a burning flame hidden in his eyes, especially when he saw Guhan forcefully hugging Gu Xuanwu and lying on the same bed. His eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. Andreevich even clenched his fists, as though he was going to punch Gahan at any time. Of course, Andreevich held back in the end. After all, they were cousins. It was none of his business that they were sleeping on the same bed. Damn you. Do you really think you are my father? Who wants to sleep on the same bed with a pervert like you? The bed was a single bed. It was more spacious when one person was lying on it, but it was more compact when two people were lying on it. More importantly, Gu Xuanwu's behavior was very dishonest. He constantly struggled and wanted to leave Gohan's side. If you want me to see your mother, then you should obediently sleep. If something goes wrong, I won't take any responsibility. Gohan's words made Gu Xuanwu suddenly become a lot more honest. He didn't struggle anymore, but from time to time, he would use his 2 fingers to pinch Gohan's flesh. Unfortunately, no matter how hard Gu Xuanwu tried, Gohan always had a calm expression, as if Gu Xuanwu was not pinching his own flesh. I'm warning you. You are absolutely not allowed to touch me. Otherwise, Bai Tai will ruthlessly stab you with his sword. Do you understand? Gu Xuanwu fiercely threatened. Qingpin, come out for a moment. It wasn't a good idea to let Gu Xuanwu toss and turn like this, so Gohan brought out the versatile Qingpin. Ever since Qingpin drank a cup of snake bile from the 3-foot sword and fainted, he hadn't recovered from the dizziness. Therefore, in the following battle, Qingpin was very quiet and didn't come out to cause trouble. Instead, he obediently stayed in the scabbard and slept. Therefore, when Gohan once again pulled out Qingpin from the scabbard, Qingpin was still drooling as he slept, but his eyebrows and nose were still wrinkled. Obviously, he was still savoring the delicious golden Prajna snake bile. This is the Qingpin sword. Gohan placed Qingpin in between him and Gu Xuanwu. With Qingpin between us, you don't have to worry about me plotting against you. It seemed like Gohan was using Qingpin as a human isolator. However, this was indeed a good idea, because among all of Gohan's sword ladies, Gu Xuanwu was the least against Qingpin. She was also willing to sleep with Qingpin. Sure enough, when Gu Xuanwu saw Qingpin, this person quieted down a lot. He no longer licked Gohan's flesh, but buried his face deep into Qingpin's body, reveling in the milky fragrance on Qingpin's body. Hey, are you asleep? Gohan had just closed his eyes when he heard Gu Xuanwu ask him this question. Ask what you want to ask. Gohan said, I'm a little scared. Gu Xuanwu, who was originally lively, suddenly became a little depressed. I've been out for almost a month. I don't know if my mother is doing well in the amusement park. I secretly escaped without her knowing. Would she drag her seriously ill body to look for me? There was a saying that went, the closer you are to home, the more timid you are. They were about to go home, and Gu Xuanwu suddenly began to be afraid. Maybe not. Gohan said faintly. Go to sleep. No matter what, you have to face it. When you go home, you will know what will happen. Although they were on a floating bus, and the 3 of them were squeezed on a bed, Gohan slept surprisingly comfortably. It was not until he suddenly heard a shrill, chirping sound in his ears that Gohan woke up from his sleep. Gohan, wake up. We have arrived at Shanghai Pass. Harry Chong Ruo said to Gohan. Are you nervous? Gohan looked at Harry Chong Ruo. No. How do you see me nervous? I'm not nervous at all. Harry Chong Ruo's voice was a little intermittent. Then you should pay attention to your own buttons. Gohan pointed at Harry Chong Ruo's clothes. Only then did Harry Chong Ruo realize that the bottom button of his clothes was on the 3rd buttonhole, and then it was all buttoned up in a mess. The clothes looked very awkward on his body. I'm sorry. Harry Chong Ruo's face turned red, and then ran back to his bed like a little girl and began to put on his clothes again. Gohan also patted Qingpin's little face, and found that this cute girl who had slept for almost 24 hours still had no intention of waking up. He simply stopped waking her and put her back into the scabbard. Gu Xuanwu was nowhere to be found, and when Gohan opened his eyes, he did not see the girl's shadow. Come, come, come. Time to eat. Just as Gahan was about to look for Gu Xuanwu, the girl opened the door and walked in with a big plate of steamed buns. Andreevich followed behind Gu Xuanwu. This kid laughed happily, and in his hand was a big pot of steamed porridge. Hee hee, everyone, it's time to eat. I specially went to prepare this for everyone. It turned out that Gu Xuanwu had actually gone to get breakfast. Because they came out in a hurry, most of the sword bearers did not prepare a lot of food in their dimensional pockets like they usually did when they went out. Therefore, the Gue Palace Sword Spirit was in charge of breakfast. As for lunch and dinner in the future, the Shanghai Pass Management Committee would be responsible for it, so Gohan and the other sword bearers did not need to worry about food. Come, my good brother, this is for you. Gu Xuanwu brought 3 big steamed buns to Gahan, and Andreevich also filled a bowl with porridge and brought it to Gahan. When did these two get together? One was holding the steamed buns, and the other was delivering porridge. Gahan thought silently. All of a sudden, the number of people in the room had tripled, because all the sword bearers had released their sword ladies. After all, sword ladies also needed to eat. The bus has entered the Zhou Tian star formation. All sword bearers, please get ready and pack your belongings. Get off the bus in an orderly manner and head to the Shanghai Pass Tower to await the Shanghai Pass Management Committee's battle allocation. The voice of the Gue Palace Sword Spirit was heard from the bus's broadcast. Gohan conveniently threw the remaining steamed buns into his dimensional pocket and distributed them to the sword ladies in his pocket. Because Gohan could not release all 6 of his sword ladies, he still had 3 sword ladies who had not eaten yet. Therefore, Gohan could only rely on this little trick to deliver food to the sword ladies. It seemed like it was a little tragic to be Gohan's sword lady. Chapter 844. This is the Zhou Tian Star Big Battle Formation. After getting off the hover bus and standing on the ground under the sunlight, everyone began to tremble from the bottom of their hearts as they looked at the huge Zhou Tian Star Big Battle Formation in front of them. This Zhou Tian Star Big Battle Formation was simply too spectacular. Looking at the Zhou Tian Star Big Battle Formation from the outside, it felt like a huge black iron pot had been placed upside down on the ground, covering the entire northeast region. Inside the iron pot, countless stars could be seen shining, as if the entire starry sky had been put into the iron pot. At the outermost edge of the iron pot, there was a huge city wall that stretched as far as the eye could see. Whether it was in terms of height or length, this city wall seemed to have surpassed the strength of the outermost city wall of Yanjing City. This city wall only had a city gate in front of the hover bus, and the huge words Shanghai Pass were engraved on the city wall. Looking up from the city wall, one could see the starry sky inside the iron pot, as well as the stars that filled the sky. There were many stars in the iron pot, but the most eye-catching and brightest stars were the 2 stars that were located at the eyes of the Tai Chi Yin and Yang diagram of the iron pot. One of the stars was shining with a red light, while the other one was shining with a bluish-yellow light. These 2 stars were the eyes of the Zhou Tian Star Big Battle Formation, the Taiyin Star and the Taiyang Star, which were the sun and the moon in the traditional sense. The Taiyang Star and the Taiyin Star were the absolute eyes of the Zhou Tian Star Big Battle Formation, and they were also the key to suppressing the entire formation. Once either of these 2 stars was broken, the entire Zhou Tian Star Big Battle Formation would instantly disappear, and the 12 Zhu Wu and the Wu people, who had been suppressed by humans for hundreds of years, would also spurt out and launch the most deadly revenge on humans. Now, Wu people were besieging the sun. Gahan could vaguely see some tiny lights that were only about a pixel shining around the sun. This did not seem like a big deal, but Gahan knew that every flash of light represented an intense battle that was going on. The battle on the sun had probably reached its climax. Inside the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation, other than the extreme Yang Star and the extreme Yin Star, there were 7 other stars that were only slightly brighter than the extreme Yang Star and the extreme Yin Star. They represented the Myrtle Imperial Star, the Taiwei Imperial Star, the Tian Shur Imperial Star, the Azure Dragon in the east, the Vermilion Bird in the south, the Baihu in the west, and the black tortoise in the north. In addition to these 7 stars, there were 365 stars the size of jelly beans. According to their brightness, they belong to the 3rd level of the Zhou-Tian star battle formation. This was the guest star of the Zhou-Tian star battle formation. Finally, there were the most numerous tiny stars in the Zhou-Tian star battle formation. They were also called microstars. This was the most fundamental power of the Zhou-Tian star battle formation. It represented 14,800 mini Zhou-Tian star banners and 14,800 ancient sword bearers. Speaking of these ancient sword bearers, it was said that the sword spirit of the Gui Hall had temporarily gathered 3,000 ancient sword bearers in Yanjing City. The 7 main stars controlled 365 guest stars and 14,800 microstars. They were the backbone of the Zhou-Tian star battle formation. If more than 3 of the 7 main stars were lost, it would mean that the heavenly cycle star formation would be destroyed in an instant. All right, you can personally experience the existence of these stars later. However, you must immediately enter the Zhou-Tian star battle formation and join the battle to defend the sun. The sword spirit of Gui Palace, who was the last to get off the carriage, said to all the reinforcements. Then, the sword spirit of Black Shop gestured at the heavenly cycle star formation. Suddenly, a small door opened beside the pitch-black city gate of Shanghai Pass. Enter the Zhou-Tian star battle formation through this small door. There will be people from the Shanghai Pass Management Committee who will be in charge of assigning tasks to you. After saying this, the sword spirit of the Gui Hall jumped back onto the hover bus. Then, the hover bus drove back to Yanjing City without looking back. What's going on? He just left us here and left by himself? A middle-aged sword-bearer said with a dissatisfied expression. He had been holding back his anger towards the sword spirit of Gui Hall, who had led him to his death. However, he didn't expect the sword spirit to leave after bringing them to the gate of Shanghai Pass. Was he that afraid of death? Don't talk nonsense if you don't know anything. Liu Ling said coldly. In order to maintain the stability of the Zhou-Tian star battle formation, any sword bearer above the spiritual sword level is not allowed to enter the Zhou-Tian star battle formation. Otherwise, their power will destroy the basic structure of the Zhou-Tian star battle formation and destroy the Zhou-Tian star battle formation. Therefore, it's not that the sword spirit doesn't want to go in with us, but he can't. The sword spirit of the Gui Hall has been fighting in Shanghai Pass for 6 years. Why would he be afraid of this place? Liu Ling's words made the middle-aged sword-bearer speechless. He could only smile awkwardly. Moreover, the sword spirit of the Gui Hall has more important things to do. Not only did the famed sword-bearers suffer heavy casualties, but more than 3,000 ancient sword-bearers have also died. Since this morning, Yanjing City has mobilized all of its ancient sword-ranked sword-bearers to participate in the battle. Therefore, the sword spirit of Gui Hall must rush back to Yanjing City and bring the ancient sword-ranked sword-bearers here tomorrow morning. Liu Ling's words made everyone's heart sink. They didn't expect that more than 3,000 ancient sword-bearers had died. Moreover, more ancient sword-bearers would be coming to Shanghai Pass soon. These famed sword-ranked sword-bearers were far stronger than ancient sword-ranked sword-bearers. Those ancient sword-ranked sword-wielders were fearless enough to fight. If they continued to cower, wouldn't they become the biggest joke in the world? Therefore, the aura of the famed sword-bearers instantly increased. Then, under Liu Ling's lead, they entered the Shanghai Pass through a small door at the bottom of the city wall. They officially entered the Shanghai Pass, which was considered a hopeless place for the sword-bearers. After entering the Shanghai Pass, Guhan and the others first passed through a long and narrow passage that did not contain any light. When everything became clear, Guhan and the others suddenly found themselves in a large hall. This hall was very simple. There were no fancy decorations. There were only a few chairs in the middle of the hall. On both sides of the hall, there were 8 different small doors. Other than the small door that Guhan and the others used to enter the hall, the other 7 doors seemed to be the exit of the hall. They led to different locations and directions. Above these 7 small doors were the words Ziwei, Taiwei, Sky City, Green Dragon, Vermilion Bird, Baihu, and Black Tortoise. These 7 doors seem to represent the 7 main stars of the Zhou Tian star formation. Andrevich, Harry Changrel XXXX. The 17 of you will enter the Green Dragon Gate. There will naturally be people in the Green Dragon Gate who will arrange your tasks for you. A voice came from the hall's broadcast. Andrevich and Harry Changrua seemed to have been assigned together. They looked at each other and then neatly walked toward the door marked with the words Green Dragon. Ashima, Ladia, the 13 of you will enter the Vermilion Bird Gate. Immediately after, Ashima and Ladia were assigned to the main star of the Vermilion Bird Gate. Gahan, Leslie Dracula, Kurakin, the 20 of you will enter the Taiwei Gate. Next, the mysterious voice assigned Gahan, Leslie Dracula, Kurakin, and 17 other people together. Hearing this assignment, Gahan frowned on the spot because Gu Xianwu wasn't assigned to the same place as him. This was something that Gahan couldn't accept no matter what. Because if Gahan couldn't be assigned to the same place as Gu Xianwu, it meant that Gahan and Gu Xianwu would be stationed in different areas. Then how would Gahan be able to enter her house through Gu Xianwu? Moreover, if Gu Xianwu didn't have Gahan to watch over her, God knows what she would do. Moreover, there were a lot of other troubles, so Gahan had to be assigned to the same place as Gu Xianwu. This was Gahan's bottom line. I object. Under everyone's astonished gaze, Gahan only used a clear voice to respond to the person in the broadcast. My cousin must be with me. I refuse to be separated from my cousin. The voice in the broadcast was silent for a while. You must listen to the management of our Shanghai Sea Sword Committee Management Committee. You must abide by our assignment. Now, please enter the Taiwei Gate immediately. Otherwise, what can you do? What can you do to me? Without waiting for the person to finish, Gahan directly interrupted him. Otherwise, our Shanghai Sea Management Committee will let you know what rules are. The voice in the broadcast was very dignified, but no matter how one listened to this dignified voice, there was a hint of helplessness. It was obvious that the Shanghai Sea Management Committee had not met anyone who dared to disobey their orders for a long time. That's good. Gahan squinted his eyes. Then let me see the rules of your Shanghai Sea Management Committee. I want to see what exactly are the rules. To be able to make me, Gahan, submit. Ignorant. The voice in the broadcast was still dignified. Your actions are provoking the entire human race. You are provoking the dignity of the Sword Committee. We will immediately inform the Yuzhong City Sword Committee to carry out a severe punishment. If necessary, we will even strip you and your family of all privileges. This was the first punishment that the Shanghai Sea Management Committee had for people who dared to provoke them. It had to be said that this punishment was effective in most situations. This was because after the famous sword bearers entered Shanghai Sea, they were most concerned about the fate of their family and whether they were living well. Therefore, when the Shanghai Sea Management Committee mentioned that they would remove the privileges of the family members of the sword bearers, most of the sword bearers would behave. Unfortunately, the Shanghai Sea Management Committee had met a troublesome guy like Gahan. Chapter 845. What kind of person was Gahan? He had no father or mother. He was a bachelor in Yuzhong City, and he had no family that he cared about. Even if he did, the Shanghai Pass Management Committee would not be able to punish Gahan's family. As long as Lu Lei and Lu Shihua were still the chairman of Yuzhong City's Sword Committee and Sword Pavilion Master, then Gahan would be safe in Yuzhong City and no one would be able to touch his family. Therefore, after Gahan heard the Shanghai Pass Management Committee's words, he did not have any expression of worry on his face and still had an uncooperative attitude. He pulled Gu Xuanwu tightly to his side and did not listen to the Shanghai Pass Management Committee's instructions at all as he entered Supreme Sect. How about this? I'll switch places with Gu Xuanwu and let Miss Gu Xuanwu and Brother Gahan go to Supreme Sect together. Seeing this situation, Kurakin took the initiative to help. Logically speaking, Kurakin's plan was very good, and there would be no problem if they followed it. All they had to do was switch places, and all the problems would be solved. However, How could the Shanghai Pass Management Committee agree to Ku Rakin's suggestion? Didn't this mean that the Shanghai Pass Management Committee would give in under the threat of Gahan, this troublemaker? Then how would they manage so many sword bearers in the future? So, with a guy with no parents, no wonder he dares to speak so arrogantly here. The owner of the voice seemed to understand the reason for Gahan's fearlessness, so he said in a very mocking tone. If it was a few months ago, Gahan would definitely rush up to find the guy who dared to insult his parents and fight him. However, the current Gahan was quite indifferent to this and treated it as if this person was just farting. Don't think that no one in Shanghai Pass can deal with you. In Guanlo, there are. The voice suddenly stopped mid-sentence. He had wanted to say that there was a team of elite sword-bearers stationed at Guanhua to deal with rebellious troublemakers like Gahan. But just as he was about to speak, he remembered that due to the intense battle in Shanghai Pass, all the members of the Discipline Inspection Committee had been sent to the battlefield. The entire building was actually empty, with only a few people maintaining the basic operations of the building. You shameless bastard! How dare you threaten us with such a despicable method when our Shanghai Pass and the entire human race is in danger? I. The owner of the voice could no longer remain calm. He was so angry that his tongue began to curl. You rascal! So what if you and your cousin are separated for a while? You're such a selfish bastard. That's right. I can't stand it anymore. How can this kind of person be a *T young genius of the younger generation? Let me, this old man, teach you how to be a proper person. Exactly. That's right. Don't think that just because the people of the Discipline Inspection Committee aren't here, that you could be so arrogant. I was a good member of the Discipline Inspection Committee when I was young. Teaching a brat like you a lesson is like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. Brothers, let's go together. Let's teach this little guy a good lesson and teach him how to be a proper person. Perhaps enraged by Gahan's arrogant attitude, the middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers quickly surrounded Gahan and prepared to teach Gahan how to be a proper person. However, different from the middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers, the younger generation who knew of Gahan's strength did not act rashly. Instead, they stood where they were and did not plan to join the attack. Good. As expected, the eyes of the masses are sharp. Even your companions can't bear to watch your evil actions. The voice instantly became full of vigor again. Seniors, please be careful when you attack. Although this person is despicable, he is still a human. After capturing him, just use a talisman to seal the sword essence in his body. Lock him up and do not harm his life. These middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers were actually not bad people. Even if the voice did not say anything, they would not really harm Gahan's life. Thus, one of the more prestigious sword-bearers said, "Young man, we do not wish to make things difficult for you. Just surrender and wait for the Discipline Inspection Committee's judgment." Gahan did not speak. Instead, he directly pulled out his Juzi sword. Everyone here are seniors and the pillars of our human race. Now that we have fallen into a dangerous situation for the sake of the survival of the human race, this junior should not have pulled out his sword against you seniors. However, my cousin must be with this junior. Thus, this junior can only offend you. Since that's the case, little guy, if we use the sword essence to fight here, we will expend too much energy. When the time comes, I'm afraid that the Wu people will benefit from it. Why don't we just fight with pure sword skills and not use any skills? Once someone's personal shield is attacked, that person will voluntarily retreat from the battlefield and admit defeat. What do you think? The senior said. That's great. Of course, Gahan agreed. It was just like what the old man said. If both sides fought seriously and used the sword essence to fight, Gahan would not be able to go all out. Otherwise, these middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers would all be severely injured. Then it would really be the Wu people who would benefit. This kind of pure sword skills competition was the best. In this world, Gahan still did not think that there was any sword-bearers whose sword skills could surpass his. Fight! 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 Kill this shameless brat! In the broadcasting room, a little girl shouted. This little girl was at most 11 or 12 years old. She was probably not even a sword-bearer. It was unknown how she appeared in such a crucial place like Shanghai Pass Tower. She was also in charge of the dispatch of the entire Shanghai Pass. Go, go, kill this brat. Soon, in the monitor, Guhan and the middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers were fighting. The little girl raised her fist and cheered for the middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers. In the beginning, these middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers were still reserved. Only one of them was a famous sword-level swordmistress. Although there was only one famous sword-level swordmistress, these middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers were still very confident. This was because although this famous sword-level swordmistress did not rank high in the famous sword records, her sword skills were one of the best. It was said that she could be ranked in the top 15 among the famous sword-level swordmistresses. Therefore, in these middle-aged and elderly practitioners' minds, this annoying brat was definitely going to lose. It was a pity that these middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers did not seem to be paying attention to the Octagon tournament. Otherwise, they would not have looked down on Gahan's sword skills. In just 3 seconds, the little girl in front of the monitor went silent. This was because the famous sword-level swordmistress's arm had been struck by Guhan's Juzzy sword. According to the agreement between Guhan and these middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers, this sword-mistress had already lost. So you're a sword-master. No wonder you're so arrogant. The sword-bearer who was in charge of communicating with Gahan frowned. He could already sense that Gahan was not easy to deal with. Even the famous sword-level swordmistress had lost. Among the other middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers, there was probably no one who could beat him in a one-on-one fight. Of course, there were people who could beat him in a one-on-one fight, such as this middle-aged and elderly sword-bearer. He looked at Liuyan Ling, who was standing in the distance. He was very sure that as long as the successor of the Liuyan family clan was willing to make a move, this arrogant young man would definitely be defeated. It was a pity that Liuyan Ling ignored his gaze. Clearly, she did not want to get involved in Gahan's fight. Old fellows, even if we lose face today, we have to let this little fellow understand the principles of being a human. Helpless, the sword-bearer could only use the tactic of ganging up on Gahan. Hence, under his command, the 4 sword-bearers released their sword-mistresses at the same time. Then, the 4 sword-mistresses attacked Gahan at the same time. Well done. You should have done this to this bad guy long ago. The little girl said fiercely in the broadcasting room as she raised her fist. In her opinion, although the previous sword-mistress had failed, now that there were 4 sword-mistresses attacking at the same time, this Gahan was definitely going to lose. However, reality soon gave the little girl a slap in the face. The 2 sides had not even fought for 3 or 4 rounds, and 2 of the sword ladies had already been hit by Guhan's close shields. They had to admit defeat according to the rules they had agreed upon. This made the middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers' faces burn. Then, they quickly sent out another 4 sword-mistresses and another 4, 8, 10. In the end, there were a total of 18 sword-mistresses attacking Gahan at the same time. Some of the students who were good at math might say, "That's not right. Shouldn't 4 plus 4 plus 8 plus 10 be 26? Why are there only 18 sword-mistresses attacking Gahan?" The reason was simple. This was because while the sword-mistresses were attacking Gahan, there were constantly sword-mistresses who were hit by their personal shields and took the initiative to retreat from the battle. Hence, when the middle-aged and elderly sword-bearers were all sent out, there were at most 18 of them left. However, when the 18 sword-mistresses attacked at the same time, Gahan could not deal with a sword-mistress in 2 or 3 moves like he did earlier. This nap lasted for a full 2 or 3 minutes. The 18 sword-mistresses constantly attacked Gahan, and Gahan seemed to have lost the ability to attack and could only passively defend. Although he was attacked by 18 sword-mistresses at the same time, Gahan's sword momentum was not the slightest bit chaotic. The Juzzy sword in his hand danced in an airtight manner. Even if the 18 swords attacked him at the same time, Gahan could still block them back. Come on, we're going to win. The little girl's blood was boiling as she watched in front of the monitor. She jumped up and down energetically, constantly waving her fists. It was as if she was also in the battle and her fists could land on Gahan. From what she knew, Although Gahan was very arrogant just now, he was now in a situation where he could only defend. And if he kept on defending, it was destined that his defense would be broken one day. Hence, she felt that Gahan was going to lose for sure. However, she did not know that during the process of this battle, Gahan's momentum was accumulating more and more. Finally, when this momentum accumulated to the peak, Gahan completely exploded. Chapter 846. The Chaos Swordsmanship was a swordsmanship that Gahan had created by himself. However, this swordsmanship was not perfect. It was only a half-finished swordsmanship. Therefore, in this swordsmanship showdown, Gahan deliberately used the Chaos Swordsmanship, hoping to use the power and magic of these sword maidens to perfect his own Chaos Swordsmanship. Fortunately, Gahan's plan succeeded. After being polished by these sword maidens, and after a minute of defense and accumulation, Gahan felt as if a string in his head had suddenly exploded. Gahan felt as if a string in his head had suddenly exploded. In an instant, a sword force flashed across his mind, and then this sword force appeared in Gahan's hand. Almost at this moment, the entire hall was filled with specks of cold light from the Juzi sword in Gahan's hand. It was so dazzling that it almost made the eyes of the onlookers dizzy. When they finally calmed down, they were shocked to find that the 16 sword maidens had all retreated with dumbfounded expressions. What was more frightening was that these famed sword maidens found that their sword maidens' personal shields had almost lost 6% to 2% of their energy. This seemed to be a very small energy loss, but these famed sword maidens knew very well that the guy named Gahan had not used sword essence from the beginning to the end when he fought their sword maidens. Therefore, this kind of damage was completely caused by the sword itself. This was a very frightening thing, because the damage caused by just using the sword maidens' bodies was almost negligible, just like in the battle between Gahan and the sword maidens at the beginning. Although Gahan had also attacked the sword maidens' personal shields, the energy loss of the sword maidens' personal shields was only about 0.3%, which was almost equivalent to no energy loss at all. However, the 0.3% energy loss was enough to shock the middle-aged and elderly swordsmen. If they were to attack the sword maiden's personal shield with all their might without using their sword essences, they might not even be able to consume 0.1% of the personal shield's energy, let alone 6% to 2% like Gahan did. To these middle-aged and elderly swordsmen, it was as unbelievable as telling them that a bridge made of paper could support the weight of a tank. P.S. In fact, a bridge made of paper could indeed support the weight of a tank. These middle-aged and elderly famed sword maidens were more concerned about the energy loss of their personal shields, but behind them, Liu Ling and the other young elites were more concerned about Gahan's last strike, because they did not clearly see the trajectory of the sword and how it was used. Miss Ling, did you see the knack of this last strike? I don't think I saw it clearly. Leslie Dracula whispered in Liu Ling's ear. I didn't see it clearly either. Liu Ling's answer was very straightforward, and her voice was not soft either, so her answer was clearly heard by the rest of the younger generation. The way they looked at Gahan instantly changed, and there was already a little bit of awe in their eyes. This is the real Chaos Heaven Splitter. On the other side of the hall, Gu Xianwu was also stunned. She knew this strike. She knew the name of this strike was Chaos Heaven Splitter. She even knew how to use this strike and how to use each step after breaking it down. This was because this was one of the most powerful strikes in the Chaos Sword Art. Gu Xianwu spent a total of 3 years to master this strike. After mastering it, she once asked her mother about how she was using it, and whether she had reached the point where she surpassed her father. However, after letting out a long sigh, her mother told her that she had only touched the surface of the sword, not to mention surpassing the master. It was worlds apart from her father's primal chaos heaven splitting sword. The difference was like the difference between heaven and earth, like the difference between heaven and earth. Gu Xuanwen naturally did not believe his mother's words. It was only until now, when he saw Gahan use the primal chaos split the heavens with his own eyes, that he finally understood that what he knew was indeed only the tip of the iceberg. It was not on the same level as the primal chaos split the heavens that Guhan used. This doesn't count. He's acting shamelessly. He must have used the sword essence. Everyone, don't be fooled by him. Let's teach this stinking brat a lesson together. In the broadcast, the voice kept urging, and you guys, do you really deserve to be called young elites? Why don't you make a move when you see a person who tramples on the rules of mankind? Could it be that you're in cahoots with him and want to wallow in the mire with him? Who else wants to give it a try? Gohan took a deep breath and calmed the surging blood in his meridians. This was the first time Gohan had used this strike, and Gohan himself felt very good. He wanted to find an opponent to fight and vent his surging blood. Unfortunately, after seeing Gohan's abnormal chaos heaven splitter, no one dared to make a move. What a joke! Who would be interested in fighting with this abnormal person? So even though the voice in the broadcast kept urging, no one paid attention to it. The scene was so awkward that one could hear a pin drop. There's a descendant of the Lunyan clan here. Are you just going to watch this person continue to be arrogant? As the judge of humans, the defender of justice, where has your persistence gone? Hurry up and teach this stinking brat a lesson. Io. The little girl started to target Liuyan Ling, trying to provoke Liuyan Ling into making a move. But before she could finish, she seemed to be interrupted by something. At the same time, in the broadcast room, the little girl was listening to someone's reprimand with her head lowered. Wei Tian, what are you doing? Why haven't the reinforcements I asked for arrived yet? A manic voice exploded in the little girl's head through the personal terminal, causing Wei Tian to feel dizzy and disoriented. Dad, this has nothing to do with me. It's that guy called Gohan. He didn't listen to my commands. He insisted. Wei Tian explained, feeling wronged. I don't care. I'll give you another 10 minutes. If my reinforcements don't arrive in 10 minutes, you'll have to wait to collect your father's corpse. With a snap, Wei Tian's father hung up the phone, leaving Wei Tian with a mournful look on her face. That bastard. Why aren't you taking your sister and scram to the Tai Wei sect? The rest of you, go to Ziwei sect. Woo 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 woo. Don't worry about me. Let me cry for a while. After Wei Tian finished speaking to the broadcast, she began to cry. And when she said this, because Wei Tian's hand accidentally hit a button, it turned off a certain switch. Therefore, when this sentence spread out, it was no longer the vigorous and thick male voice from before, but the voice of an authentic little girl. It turned out that Wei Tian had been using a voice changer to speak. At the same time, because Wei Tian didn't plan to turn off the broadcast, the people in the hall were immersed in the pitiful cry of a little girl. So, although the remaining people didn't dare to make a move against Gohan, they all looked at Gohan with disdain, as if blaming Gohan for making a little girl cry. Gohan's face also turned cold. Then, with a rare silence, Gu Xuanwu took the lead and entered the Tai Wei sect. You've finally come in. I'm about to die of anxiety waiting here. After Gohan and the 20 famed sword-rank sword-bearers who were assigned to the Tai Wei sect entered the Tai Wei sect, they found that the inside of the sect was also a tunnel. However, this tunnel was far longer than the tunnel at the entrance. When Gohan walked out of the tunnel, he found that he seemed to have entered the interior of a vehicle, and inside, there was already a man who was covered in injuries waiting for him. He said to Gohan, "This is a star shuttle." Gohan observed the interior of this vehicle and came to this conclusion. Yes, this is a star shuttle, a vehicle that can only be used in the Zhou-Tian star battle formation. The man with injuries said, and at this time, the last sword-bearer also entered the star shuttle. So, the man pressed a button next to him, and the door of the star shuttle slowly closed. Then, the entire star shuttle flew out at an extremely fast speed. Gohan had long heard of the famous star shuttle. The star shuttle's flying speed was extremely fast. It was said that it could reach a terrifying speed of 5,000 kilometers per hour. At this speed, it would only take half an hour to travel between Yuzhong City and Yanjing City. However, ever since the sky was blocked by Yuan Ko, humans could no longer use any flying tools. Only in the Zhou-Tian star battle formation could one use the power of the stars to fly in the sky. Cough, cough. Good morning, comrades. My name is Lu Yuanjia. the former guardian of the 9 sections, star small, Zhou Tian star flag. Now, I'm just an old driver responsible for driving the star shuttle. The old driver named Lu Yuanjia took the initiative to introduce himself. There are still 10 minutes before the decisive battle. In these 10 minutes, I will tell you the basic situation in the Zhou Tian star battle formation. At the same time, I will tell you what to do, how to quickly join the battle, and how to better protect your own lives. Chapter 847. First, the current battle situation. Lu Yuanjia began to explain. Everyone present, including Gahan, didn't interrupt him. Lu Yuanjia's words were very important. Every word could be related to their lives, so Guhan and the others couldn't miss a single word. The Wu people launched a surprise attack on the Zhou Tian star formation's Sun Star Formation at 5 p.m. yesterday. However, because Lady Lilith discovered the Wu people's plot in time, she repelled the Wu people's first wave of attack and successfully protected the Sun Star Formation. However, the despicable Wu people didn't just launch a sneak attack on the Sun Star Formation. They also attacked Lady Mu Yin, who was in charge of guarding the Myrtle Imperial Star, Lady Shi Guang, Green Dragon Imperial Star, and Lady Hong Yu of the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star. Lady Mu Yin unfortunately died in the sneak attack. Lady Shi Guang was seriously injured and was protected by Lady Lilith in the Sun Star. Lady Shi Guang and Lady Hong Yu also successfully repelled the sneak attack and protected the 2 Zhou Tian Star Formation banners. However, the 2 Zhou Tian Star banners of the Myrtle Imperial Star and Taiwei Imperial Star have been completely destroyed. In order to completely destroy the Zhou Tian Star Formation, the Wu people began to use all their strength to attack the various areas under the control of the Sun Star. The 12 tribes of the Wu people have all been mobilized. Since 4 p.m. yesterday, all of us have been fighting day and night for a whole 18 hours. Because we suffered heavy losses in the attack a month ago, and we didn't have any reinforcements, we have been miserably suppressed by the Wu people. Our comrades are constantly sacrificed, and the area under our control is getting smaller and smaller. Fortunately, the Wu people also suffered heavy losses in that battle. They can no longer launch fatal attacks on us, so the entire situation has become a situation of mutual attrition. Whichever side's forces disappear first, that side will be declared defeated. However, because the Wu people should be using the power of Zhu Wu's blood to recover, as long as they don't die on the spot, they can enter Zhu Wu's blood to recover. Also, Zhu Wu's blood can continuously create new Wu people, so their forces can continuously join in. In comparison, because we humans don't have reinforcements, we lose 1 sword bearer every time we die. We can't continue to fight the Wu people. According to Lady Lilith's estimation, the massive heavenly cycle stellar formation will be breached at noon today at the earliest, which is 3 hours later. When that happens, we humans will face a catastrophe. Now, besides the Sun Star Formation I, the Formation, the Zhou Tian Star, and the Zhou Tian Imperial Star have been broken through. Only the Azure Dragon and Imperial Star and Taiwei Star are. On the other hand, the Sorcerer race's main target was the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star. When I left the battlefield, there were less than 300 minor Heavenly Cycle Star banners left in the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star. The number of minor Heavenly Cycle Star banners was continuously decreasing, and I estimated that there were only 250 or so left. Once the regions controlled by these 250 minor Heavenly Cycle Star banners disappear, the Vermilion Bird Emperor Star will be completely breached, and the entire Heavenly Cycle Star formation will be finished. After about 5 minutes, Lu Yuanjia finally finished explaining the current situation. To put it simply, the most intense battle was on the Imperial Star. As long as the area controlled by the Imperial Star was destroyed, the entire Zhou Tian Star formation would also be destroyed. Then, the 12 Zhu Wus would break free, and the human race would be finished. That means that our current goal is to save the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star. As long as we can protect the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star, the entire Heavenly Cycle Star formation will also be safe. An elderly sword wielder said. That's right, So our next goal is to go to the Imperial Star and help the swordsmen there fight against the Wu people. We'll suppress the arrogant Wu people. Lu Yuanjia nodded. I have a question. Leslie Dracula said, since we're going to save the Imperial Star, what's the point of us going through 4 different gates? Aren't we going to the same place in the end? Leslie Dracula glanced at Gahan. Her meaning was simple. She was looking down on Gahan. Gahan, in order to enter the same gate as his cousin, worked with more than 30 swordsmen at the same time. In the end, it was all a waste of time. Even if they entered different gates, they would still end up in the same place. It's not that simple. Gahan looked at Leslie Dracula. If it's really what you think, we can all go to the Vermilion Bird Gate. Why do we have to go through 4 different gates and take different star shuttles? I think 1 star shuttle can fit more than 100 people at the same time. This little brother sure has a clear mind. This star shuttle was parked quite a distance away from the hall where the battle had taken place. After all, Gohan and the others had been walking for a long time, so Lu Yuanjia didn't know what had happened in the hall. Naturally, he didn't know how Gahan had forced Wei Tian to change her arrangement and let Gahan stay with his cousin. If we just need you to support the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star, then 1 star shuttle would be enough. In fact, our first destination is not the battlefield on the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star, but the Sun Star Formation I. We'll hold the flag planting ceremony there, then head to the battlefield on the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star, Lu Yuanjia explained. Flag planting ceremony? What's that? Is it like when I was in school? Do we have to watch that boring flag rise every morning? Leslie Dracula pouted. Of course not. Our Shanghai Pass isn't that boring. Lu Yuanjia smiled. It seems that some of you don't understand the lifestyle and fighting style of our Shanghai Pass, so I need to tell you more. Our Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation is made up of 365 large Zhou Tian Star flags and 14800 small Zhou Tian Star flags. Therefore, these 15,000 star flags are the foundation of the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation. Each sword bearer controls 1 Zhou Tian Star flag. At least 10,000 Zhou Tian Star flags must be maintained to ensure the existence of the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation. At the same time, the entire Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation is filled with dense star power. Such dense star power can even suppress the sword essence in our bodies, making it impossible for us to use the power of the sword essence. It's fine outside the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation, but as we go deeper into the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation, it's like the sword bearers have drunk Chuhi soup. They can't even release their sword maidens. If you don't believe me, you could try to release your sword maidens now. I guarantee that you won't be able to release anything. After hearing Lu Yuanjia's words, everyone started to try to release their sword maidens. In the end, they were dumbfounded. Just as Lu Yuanjia said, their sword maidens couldn't be released at all. How can this be? How are we supposed to fight in the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation? A sword bearer asked anxiously. That's why we need to hold this flag-planting ceremony. Lu Yuanjia smiled strangely. If we, the sword bearers, want to fight in the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation, we have to convert the sword essence in our bodies into star power. A few hundred years ago, when that bastard Jade Emperor gave the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation to the sword bearers, he also gave them a method to convert the sword essence into star power. That is, insert the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation into your purple palace and use the power of the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation to convert the sword essence in the sword bearer's body into star power. Then, you can use the star power to drive the sword maidens to fight. This is the origin of the flag planting ceremony. By inserting the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation into your purple palace, you can convert the sword essence into star power. Then, you can use the star power to control the sword maidens to fight. However, every Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation has a fixed number. Only when the owner of the old Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation leaves or dies can you inherit the new Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation. At the same time, in order to balance out the strength of the various Emperor Stars, we can't directly make you all belong to the Vermilion Bird Emperor Star's spiritual cycle star banner. You will have to be divided into 4 Emperor Stars that have suffered heavy losses. Among them, the Myrtle Imperial Star and the Supreme Micro-Imperial Star suffered the most, so these two Emperor Stars have the most famous sword-bearers. Because the Myrtle Imperial Star and the Supreme Micro-Imperial Star have been breached, the Great Jotion Star battle formation has been moved to the Sun Star, which is the eye of the formation. So, you have to go to the Sun Star and hold the flag-planting ceremony with the Great Jotion Star battle formation. After converting the sword essence in your body into star power, you can go to the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star to provide support. So that's how it is. After hearing Lu Yuanji's explanation, everyone let out a long sigh of relief. So, they only needed to hold the flag-planting ceremony to recover their battle strength. They thought it would always be like this, where they couldn't even summon their sword maidens. According to what you said, we should be heading to the Sun Star now. Gohan suddenly asked. Of course. I made it very clear. You can only hold the flag-planting ceremony if you go to the Sun Star. Lu Yuanjie frowned, as if he was very dissatisfied with Gohan asking a question he already knew the answer to. Then I'm curious. Why do I feel that according to the route shown on this map, we're going to the territory of the Supreme Micro-Imperial Star? Gohan asked as he looked at the GPS real-time panoramic map on the Star Shuttle. This was a three-dimensional map. On it, there was a small dot constantly flying between the mountains. Obviously, this dot represented the Star Shuttle. This map was only used to show the flight status of the Star Shuttle, so there were no specific places marked on the map. There were only various kinds of terrain constantly passing by. What are you talking about? We are clearly going to the Sun Star. Lu Yuanji's voice suddenly became a little nervous. If I remember correctly, the mountain in front of us on the map should be the Big Black Mountain. On the left of the Big Black Mountain is the Shack Mountain, and on the right is the Lonely Mountain. If we fly forward for another minute, we will reach the original Shenyang City ruins. 10 hours ago, it was the place where the Supreme Micro-Imperial Star was stationed. Now it has been completely conquered by the Wu people. What? When everyone heard what Gohan said, they immediately stood up in shock. This Lu Yuanjie was using the Star Shuttle to take them to the occupied Shenyang City. What was this Lu Yuanjie thinking? Ha ha ha. The chief told me not to underestimate you humans. I didn't think much of it. I didn't expect there to be a new sword wielder who really remembered the entire northeast region. Ha ha ha. But it's too late. You can all go to hell. Lu Yuanjie suddenly roared. He suddenly turned into a monster with a human face and dog ears. There were two green snakes hanging from his ears. Chapter 848. The Wu people were living beings created by the 12 Zhu Wu with their own blood. They shared the same lineage as the 12 Zhu Wu. They inherited the name Zhu Wu and were divided into 12 different tribes. They were the Russia tribe, Gomong tribe, Gonggong tribe, Zhurong tribe, Hutu tribe, Tianwu tribe, Xinming tribe, Changyang tribe, Xuanzi tribe, Dijiang tribe, Canaljuing tribe, and Shebi tribe. The Wu people of these 12 tribes all looked different. They each had the features of humans and beasts. The human-headed, beast-like monster that Lu Yuanjie had transformed into in front of Gohan and the others was the most eye-catching feature of the Shebi tribe's Wu people. What's going on? Some of the sword-bearers yelled in panic when they saw Lu Yuanjie's shocking transformation. It's obvious that the real Lu Yuanjie is dead. The Lu Yuanjie in front of us is just a corpse possessed by the Shebi tribe's Wu people. Leslie Dracula said with a frown. I remember now. I've read about the 12 Wu people. The Wu people of the Shebi tribe were born with the ability to possess other people's corpses. They could control the movement of other people's corpses. Immediately, some of the sword-wielding bearers reacted and quickly imagined the entire process through their imagination. The real Lu Yuanjie had died at some point, and the Wu people of the Shebi tribe had possessed Lu Yuanjie's corpse and pretended to be Lu Yuanjie to pick them up on the Star Shuttle. If I'm not mistaken, I'm afraid there are many Wu people waiting for us at the Shenyang City ruins, right? Gohan said, looking at the Wu people. Hearing Gohan's words, all the sword-bearers present couldn't help but shiver. When they thought about the countless Wu people's warriors attacking them after they got off the Star Shuttle, they did not dare to think further. Oh my God, am I going to die here today? A sword-bearer thought sadly. Oh my God. I can't believe that my first day in Shanghai Pass would be the day of my death. I really can't accept this. More than one person had the same thought. Ha ha ha. After restoring his real body, Wu people Lu Yuanjia's voice was no longer the standard human Mandarin. Instead, it had a strong sense of dialect, like a foreigner speaking Chinese. You think too much. There aren't many warriors of the Wu people's clan waiting for you. To deal with you, only 2 strong warriors of the Zhurong clan are enough. Ha ha. This Wu people laughed crazily. Are you telling the truth? There are only 2 Wu people waiting for us down there. Hearing that there were only 2 warriors from the Wu people's tribe waiting for them, these sword bearers immediately let out a sigh of relief. What kind of joke was this? 2 insignificant warriors of the Wu people's tribe wanted to deal with 20 famed swordsmen? Wasn't this a huge joke? Everyone, don't be fooled. This Wu people must be lying to us. There can't only be 2 Wu people down there. There must be thousands of soldiers waiting for us down there. Immediately, a middle-aged and elderly sword-bearer reminded the others. Pooh! Lu Yuanjia spat at the sword-bearer. Don't be so full of yourself. 2 warriors of the Wu people's tribe are enough to deal with you. Do you still think that you are the powerful sword-bearers outside the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation? Don't forget, you are deep inside the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation, and none of you have held the flag planting ceremony. Therefore, you are just ordinary humans. Maybe I won't even have to deal with the 2 warriors of the Zhurong clan. I can kill you all by myself. Lu Yuanjia of the Witch Tribe opened his strange mouth and laughed. Through his mouth, the sword bearers were surprised to find that there was not only 1 tongue in his throat, but a total of 3 tongues swaying in his mouth. It was a creepy sight. Then, Lu Yuanjia of the Sorcerer Tribe quickly stretched out his 3 tongues. Like 3 agile pythons, they instantly wrapped around the necks of the 3 sword bearers. The sword bearers subconsciously wanted to release their sword ladies. However, when they grabbed the hilts of their sword ladies, they suddenly remembered that their sword elements had been suppressed by the power of the stars in the Zhoutian Star Battle Formation. They couldn't release their sword ladies at all. At the same time, Lu Yuanjia's tongue began to shrink, like 3 strands of white silk, trying to strangle the 3 sword bearers to death. The 3 unlucky sword bearers instinctively grabbed at the tongue that was wrapped around their necks, trying to pry it loose, but it was destined to be futile. After losing their sword essence, their bodies were at most at the level of an ordinary person. Their opponent was a Wu people. Although they didn't know what level this Wu people was at, even a junior magus, the lowest level among the Wu people, was equal to the tiger level Yuan Ko. These 3 sword bearers, who had returned to the level of ordinary humans, couldn't pry them off at all. Everyone, let's save them. The other sword bearers immediately moved. Although they couldn't release their sword ladies, they could still fight with their swords. In a split second, over 10 sword ladies hacked on Lu Yuanjia's tongue. Although these sword bearers only had the strength of ordinary humans, the sword ladies themselves could cause a lot of damage to the Wu people. The 3 tongues were immediately slashed with many wounds, and some of them even had small cuts. The pain made Lu Yuanjia's expression contort. Yes, our attacks are working. Everyone, continue to attack these tongues, the sword bearers said excitedly. However, after suffering once, how could Lu Yuanjia of the Wu people suffer a second time? So, when these sword bearers were about to attack again, Lu Yuanjia of the Wu people's Lu Yu's body suddenly released over 10 air blades. These air blades weren't very powerful, and these famous level sword bearers wouldn't care about them at all. Even if these air blades hit their bodies, they wouldn't even consume 1% of the energy of their personal shields. But these sword bearers forgot that they no longer had their personal shields. Therefore, the air blades directly slashed the bodies of the sword bearers, cutting a hole in their clothes and leaving streaks of blood on their bodies at the same time. The injured sword bearers all wailed in anguish, and the sword maidens in their hands also fell to their knees involuntarily. Ha 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 ha! You useless sword bearers, without your sword ladies, without your personal shields, You're not even worth a fart." Lu Yuanjie of the witch tribe shouted crazily, but his words deeply hurt the hearts of the sword-bearers. Just as he had said, after losing the power of the sword lady, these sword-bearers who usually held high positions behaved worse than ordinary people. Ordinary humans could still fight with their willpower after being seriously injured, but these sword-bearers couldn't bear the pain of their wounds and could only fall to the ground. "I'll send the 3 of you on your way, then I'll deal with the rest." "Ah!" Lu Yuanjie of the Wu people suddenly cried out in pain. Then 3 streams of blue liquid shot out like water guns, instantly dyeing the surrounding ground blue. The blue liquid was none other than the blood of Lu Yuanjie of the Wu people. The Wu people were different from humans. The blood of the Wu people was blue. It was just like a very popular novel before the apocalypse, The Blue-Blooded People. Although the novel categorized the blue-blooded people as extraterrestrials, in other words, aliens. However, in reality, the blue-blooded people were a characteristic of the Wu people. Legend had it that after the Wu people perished, they ended up living together with humans of mixed blood. There was a very small chance that humans would revert to their ancestry, and the direct manifestation of this phenomenon was the appearance of blue blood. At that moment, Lu Yuanjie's 3 tongues that were used to restrain the 3 sword-bearers had all been severed. Furthermore, from the remaining length of the tongues and the extremely neat incision, it could be determined that the 3 stones had been severed with 1 strike. There was no need for a second strike. "No, can. As his tongues were gone, Lu Yuanjie of the Wu people could no longer speak normally. All he could do was make thick, nasal sounds. The sword-bearers present had to listen carefully to understand what Lu Yuanjie was trying to say. Trash! Another sword beam flashed, and Lu Yuanjie of the Wu people's head flew up before falling to the ground. His body fell to the ground in a daze, and blue blood gushed out from his severed head, dyeing the entire carriage in a strange blue color. However, what was strange was that although Lu Yuanjie of the Wu people was dead, the dimensional vortex didn't appear. This already defied the common sense of this world. However, the other sword-bearers didn't find this strange. Although they didn't have a detailed understanding of the Wu people in Shanghai Pass, they still knew basic common sense about the Wu people. The sorcerer tribe was immortal. Their power and bloodline came from their ancestor of sorcery. Therefore, even if they were killed, they would return to the body of their ancestor of sorcery through the veins of the earth. After waiting for a period of time, they could be resurrected and once again become the sorcerer tribe that fought against humans. Moreover, the resurrected sorcerer tribe members would inherit the appearance and name of their previous life. Their power and attributes would be exactly the same as the previous generation. It was equivalent to being reborn. Of course, the reborn Wu people couldn't recover their previous memories. This was also one of the reasons why Shanghai Pass needed tens of thousands of sword-bearers to guard it for centuries. This was because the Wu people's strength in Shanghai Pass couldn't be depleted at all. There would only be a period of trough. After this period of time, the sorcerer tribe of the 12 tribes would be able to recover their full strength. Therefore, the humans could not relax their guard over the Shanghai Pass. The only thing that could be considered fortunate was that no matter how much they fought and cultivated, these Wu people couldn't improve their abilities. The ability level they had when they were first born would be the same in this life. Even after being reborn, it would still be the same. Otherwise, if these Wu people could continue cultivating after being reborn, Shanghai Pass wouldn't have been able to defend it long ago. Chapter 849. How could you? When Wu people Lu Yuanjie was completely dead, the other sword-bearers, including Leslie Dracula, realized that a valiant young girl was standing in front of them with a long sword that was covered in blue blood. It was obvious that this young girl was the one who killed Wu people Lu Yuanjie. However, these sword-bearers could not understand why their dozens of sword ladies were unable to directly cut off Wu people Lu Yuanjie's tongue, but this young girl was able to cut off 3 of Wu people Lu Yuanjie's tongues in 1 strike. Why? Gu Black Tortoise ignored the puzzled gazes of these sword-bearers and turned to look at Gahan beside him. Why is my primal chaos split heaven not even able to achieve 1/10 of your effect? You're thinking too much. Even if I use primal chaos split heaven, it's only at this level. Guhan shook his head and patted Black Tortoise's head. My strike just now wasn't simple. In fact, of the 2 strikes I used just now, I realized that the first strike couldn't directly cut off his tongue, so I added the sword element to the second strike to cut it off. Black Tortoise's voice appeared in Guhan's ears through secret voice transmission. It was no wonder that Black Tortoise would complain to Guhan about why her sword technique couldn't reach 1/10 of Guhan's standard. It turned out that she had secretly used the sword element to achieve the effect. You can use the sword element? Guhan was a little surprised when he heard Black Tortoise's words. Because Guhan was still a normal sword bearer, even Guhan could not use the power of the sword element and could not release his sword lady. Now that he heard that Black Tortoise could use her sword element, he was naturally a little surprised. However, when Guhan thought about it, the matter did not seem to be inexplicable. This was because Gu Xuanwu was not a human at all, but a hybrid between Yuan Ko and a human, so his body naturally had its own special characteristics. Moreover, as the only person in the world who could synchronize with the sword lady and possess the sword essence, the Gu Xuanwu must have a very special setting that even Guhan did not know about. Perhaps this setting included the Gu Xuanwu being able to use the sword essence in the Zhou-Tian star formation. I don't know why either, but I feel that the sword essence in my body isn't affected at all. It's the same as usual. Gu Xuanwu said through sound transmission, "Please don't change the topic. Tell me quickly, why is it that even though we are using the same sword technique, my power is not even 1/10 of yours? Judging from your sword technique, although there's a gap between us, the gap is not big. It won't affect me too much." Guhan began to analyze. However, my chaos sword art is not as simple as a simple sword art. Instead, it is a set of sword arts formed by the fusion of many other sword arts and my life comprehension. Therefore, there is something that can only be understood and cannot be explained in words. You're saying that I lack this thing that can only be understood and cannot be explained. Gu Xuanwu's brows furrowed even tighter. What exactly is this thing? Can't you explain it in a simpler way? I'm sorry, I can't do that. Guhan shook his head. I have yet to understand this sword art. Currently, I can only use this move, so it is still a semi-finished product. I have yet to understand the thing inside. So how am I going to teach you? You liar. You're definitely not willing to teach me. Gu Xuanwu did not believe Guhan's words from the start, and said with a pout, Then you can just treat me as a liar. Anyway, it doesn't matter to me, Guhan said with a cold face. Gu Xuanwu was speechless, although her face was filled with unwillingness. Because the entire conversation was carried out through voice transmission, these sword bearers could only hear the first few sentences of this pair of cousins. After that, Guhan and Gu Xuanwu maintained a state of silence. However, the previous few sentences were enough, because it made these sword bearers suddenly remember what had happened in the hall. The battle that Guhan had just fought in the hall was very similar to today's battle. In the same situation where they did not use sword essence, Guhan's sword strike, without using sword essence, had consumed more than 3% of the Sword Maiden's personal shield's energy. Their personal shield was a famed sword-grade personal shield, which had at least 20,000 to 30,000 points of personal shield's energy. Guhan's sword strike was equivalent to eliminating around 1,000 points of personal shield's energy. The toughness of this Wu people's Lu Yuanjia's tongue was probably equivalent to a few hundred points of personal shield's energy. Gu Xuanwu was Guhan's cousin, so she must have also learned Guhan's sword technique. Therefore, it was not strange for her to be able to cut off the Wu people's Lu Yuanjia's tongue with a single strike. Of course, these sword bearers were also curious about something. They were curious about the sword technique that Gu Xuanwu had just mentioned, Primal Chaos Heaven Splitter. Obviously, this was the name of the sword technique that had just been used. These sword bearers could not help but feel a surge of desire towards Primal Chaos Heaven Splitter. If they could also learn this technique, they would undoubtedly have a great ability to protect their lives in the upcoming battle. These sword bearers looked at Gahan with fervent gazes, as if they really wanted to learn the sword technique called Primal Chaos Heaven Splitter from Gahan. However, before these sword bearers could speak, they discovered that the star shuttle had begun to tremble violently. At the same time, through the scenery outside the window, they could see that the star shuttle's position was continuously descending. Clearly, the star shuttle had entered a state of descent. Not good. The star shuttle is about to land. We will soon be surrounded by the Wu people. One of the sword bearers wailed. Then, the atmosphere that had calmed down after killing the Wu people's Lu Yuanjia with much difficulty returned to a tense atmosphere. They were afraid that the moment the door of the star shuttle was opened, countless warriors of the wizard tribe would rush in and tear them into pieces after they lost their sword lady. Go to the pilot's seat. Hurry up and control the star shuttle. Let the star shuttle fly again and fly to the Sun Star Array Eye. The sword bearers immediately rushed to the pilot's seat, wanting to control the star shuttle again. However, when they saw the pilot's seat with their own eyes, they were all dumbfounded, because the entire manual control system on the pilot's seat had been violently destroyed. All the buttons and wires on the control lever on the panel had been pulled out. Even if the workers responsible for building the entire star shuttle were here, they would not be able to repair the seriously damaged manual control system in a short period of time. The star shuttle's automatic control system was also suffering. A large hole had been smashed in the computer screen, and the electrical components inside were constantly emitting sparks. Only a small red light on the side of the screen was constantly flashing. Next to this small light was a line of small words that clearly said, "Emergency return." "What does this light mean?" one of the sword bearers shouted. "It's an emergency return indicator light." A sword bearer immediately replied, "I've studied the books related to the star shuttle. Once the internal control system of the star shuttle is damaged or malfunctioned, the star shuttle will automatically return to its original control panel according to the mechanism set by the shuttle. This is a star shuttle that belongs to the Supreme Star. So this star shuttle is returning to the Supreme Star's control panel." One of the sword bearers said in panic, "Don't you understand? This Wu people is afraid that we will control the star shuttle to return to the Sun Star. So he deliberately destroyed all the equipment and used the automatic return system so that we can only return to the Supreme Star's control panel." That's right. No wonder he kept telling us about the situation of the battle and that stupid flag planting ceremony. At first, I really thought that he wanted us to understand what happened in Shanghai Pass, so I listened very carefully and didn't look around in detail. Now that I think about it, he was trying to attract our attention so that we wouldn't pay attention to the fact that the pilot's seat had been destroyed. Hearing this, Gohan couldn't help but feel a little guilty. This was because even he was attracted by the situation of the battle that Lu Yuanjia had described. He didn't think to pay attention to the situation in the pilot's seat. Otherwise, he wouldn't have discovered the truth through the strange 3D map in the last few minutes. These sorcerer tribesmen are too vicious. This is their meticulous plan. They know that once our reinforcements arrive, they won't be able to continue. So, they set their sights on us reinforcements. They want to kill us easily before we hold the flag planting ceremony. The sword bearer pieced the whole thing together in a few words, and that was the truth. However, as the whole truth was pieced together, everyone's confidence hit rock bottom. Since this was a meticulous plan by the Wu people, they would definitely die. As soon as the star shuttle landed, it would be the end of everyone. Don't worry. I believe what this Wu people said just now. There might really only be 2 Wu people's warriors outside. In the eyes of these Wu people, we, the sword bearers, who haven't held the flag planting ceremony, are just ordinary people. A mere junior Magus Wu people dared to try and kill us in the spaceship. This means that they look down on us. Even if there are more than 2 Wu people's warriors outside, there won't be that many of them. This is our chance. All of you listen to my command later. I will lead you to kill a path of blood to escape. At the crucial moment, Guhan stood up and said to everyone present, because of the chaos split the heavens just now, all the sword bearers present were still in awe of Gahan. They also knew that if there was really a chance to escape, they had to rely on Gahan's power. Therefore, when Gahan took the initiative to stand up and attempt to take over the management of the entire team, no one, including Leslie Dracula, objected. Thus, Gahan successfully became the temporary leader of the entire team. Chapter 850. To some extent, Lu Yuanjie was indeed a good Wu people who never lied. Because on the control panel of the Star Shuttle, only 2 Wu people warriors were waiting for the Star Shuttle to land. These were 2 warriors from the Zhurong tribe. Different from the Shibai tribe shamans who had human heads and beast bodies, the Zhurong tribe's warriors were the complete opposite. They had human bodies and beast faces, and there were 2 fire snakes hovering around their bodies. Judging by these 2 fiery snakes, one could judge the power level of the Wu people of the Zhurong tribe. If this fiery snake was only as long as a human hand, it would be a junior magus who was equal to the tiger-level Yuan Ko. If this fiery snake was as long as an arm, it would be a middle magus who was equal to the soul-level Yuan Ko. If this fiery snake had 2 dragon horns, it would be a sky magus who was equal to the dragon-level Yuan Ko. If this fiery snake had 2 dragon claws and 2 dragon horns, it would be a Fallis-level senior magus who was equal to the Fallis-level Yuan Ko. The same was true for the Shibai corpse clan. The 2 green snakes on their ears would have different shapes, and with different shapes, one could see the different levels and powers of these Wu people. Senior Magi were the limit of the Wu people, because after all, Senior Magi were creatures created by Zhu Wu. Therefore, they were born with their own limits. Unless they could absorb all of Zhu Wu's Pan-Gu spirit blood, they wouldn't be able to become Zhu Wu. But in this case, the previous Zhu Wu would die for sure, and this wouldn't make too much of a difference. The fiery snakes hovering around the 2 Zhurong tribe warriors were as long as a human arm, which meant that these 2 Wu people were middle magi of the Zhurong tribe, who were equal to the sword wielders of human beings and the soul-level Yuan Ko. This kind of power was more than enough to deal with 20 ordinary people who had lost their sword essence powers. Therefore, these 2 Zhurong tribe warriors seemed to be quite careless, as if they could do anything easily. Finally, the Star Shuttle appeared before them, and it successfully landed on the boarding platform. The 2 warriors of the Zhurong clan immediately rushed up to the Star Shuttle and stood on the left and right sides of the gate. Once the gate opened, they would rush into the Star Shuttle and kill all human beings inside. Crash! The door of the Star Shuttle opened upwards. The 2 warriors of the Zhurong clan immediately rushed into the Star Shuttle like fierce tigers. After that, a series of chaotic noises came from inside the Star Shuttle. In the end, 2 huge heads flew out of the shuttle, and the corpses of the 2 Zhurong clan warriors were thrown out as well. Inside the Star Shuttle, Guhan took out a piece of tissue and wiped all the bloodstains off Qingpin's sword. Without the sword essence, it was indeed a troublesome matter. Previously, as long as the sword Qi vibrated, Qingpin's sword would not be stained with any blood. But now, without the sword essence, even those bloody bloodstains would be stained on Qingpin's sword. Therefore, Gahan had to clean those bloodstains with his own hands. The other warriors looked at Gahan in awe, because just now, Gahan had killed the 2 warriors of the Zhurong clan all by himself. Like a graceful dancer, he even had the time to change his sword maidens during the fight. At last, he killed the 2 warriors of the Zhurong clan without being harmed at all. This is actually a bit tricky. After Guhan killed the 2 sorcerer tribe members, he also began to silently evaluate the battle just now. Without the sword essence, Guhan's fighting capacity had dropped greatly. According to Guhan's estimation, he was only as powerful as a Flood Dragon-level warrior, Yuan Ko. Without the strengthening of the sword essence, the damage he could cause with only a sword maiden was way too low, especially when he was facing the intermediate magi warriors of the Wu people, who had decent defensive abilities. Before, every single one of his attacks would have killed them, but now, he couldn't even break through their defenses. He could only rely on continuously attacking the same spot to destroy their defenses and kill them by slowly grinding them down. Therefore, when Gahan fought against the two Wu people, he had already used around half of his power, and these were only two intermediate magi. According to Gohan's estimation, if there were 3 more opponents like this, Gahan would still be able to defeat them with his full strength. If there were 10 more, Gahan might be able to maintain his undefeatable state, but if there were 11 more, then, Gahan would have no choice but to run. I didn't expect the Qingpin's sword to be useful at such a crucial moment. Gahan looked at the Qingpin sword in his hand and mumbled to himself. In the beginning, Gahan had been fighting with the Juzi sword out of habit. However, the Juzi sword itself was made from Fusang wood. With the addition of the sword essence, it could increase the damage of the path of diabolism. However, when it lost the sword essence, although Fusang wood was the greatest divine wood in the world, it was still a piece of wood, and wood was born with the characteristic of not being sharp enough. Otherwise, Gahan wouldn't have used a wooden sword to train his swordsmanship when he was young. This was because wooden swords couldn't hurt him. Therefore, when he first used the Juzi sword to fight against the two Wu people, Gahan felt very weak. The blade of the sword couldn't cause much damage when it slashed at their bodies. He had to swing the sword with all his might to draw blood. Therefore, after fighting a few rounds with the Juzi sword, Gahan decisively put the Juzi sword back into its scabbard and switched to the heavenly sword to fight. Gahan originally wanted to switch to the Qidian sword because the Qidian sword's basic material was the strongest. It was made of emperor alloy, so it should be the sharpest sword among Gahan's sword ladies. Furthermore, due to the existence of dimensional nodes, as long as Gahan was willing, he could attack the other party's dimensional nodes and create a dimensional vortex to send these Wu people back even without any sword essence. However, it seemed like these Wu people wouldn't produce a dimensional vortex after they died. From the looks of it, the special effects of the Qidian sword wouldn't work on the Wu people. However, the problem was that the Qidian sword and the Juzi sword looked identical. The only difference was that the colors were black and white. As the entire battle was being watched by the other practitioners, they would definitely be curious as to why Gahan had 2 sword ladies that looked identical but had different colors. Therefore, unless it was an emergency, Gahan didn't wish to use the Qidian sword to avoid unnecessary trouble. Therefore, the heavenly sword became the best choice. In terms of sharpness, the heavenly sword naturally far exceeded the Juzi sword. Gahan didn't need to use any strength to leave a bloody mark on his opponent's body. This way, Gahan's battle was much easier than before. Most of the damage suffered by the two Wu people was caused by the heavenly sword. However, when Gahan wanted to kill the two Wu people with the heavenly sword, Gahan suddenly heard Qingpin's voice. Qingpin seemed to be using her usual soft voice to urge Gahan to kill the two Wu people. Although Gahan didn't know why he heard Qingpin's voice, it didn't stop him from testing according to the voice. Therefore, Gahan switched the heavenly sword to Qingpin's sword. The blade of the sword lightly swung and cut the two Wu people's severely injured necks, sending them to their deaths. When the two heads flew into the air, Gahan seemed to feel something seeping into the blade of Qingpin's sword. What should we do now? Seeing the two Zhu Rong warriors, who had ambushed them, die, the other sword bearers on the scene let out a long sigh and couldn't help but ask one question. What should they do now? What else can we do? Of course, we have to find a way to get to the sun. Leslie Dracula pouted. Are we supposed to wait for death here? We don't have to wait for death here. Another older swordsman stroked his beard and said, I looked around just now and realized that there are no other witch tribesmen around this landing stage. This place is surprisingly deserted. Therefore, I believe that most of the Wu people have gathered at the front line of the Vermilion Bird Imperial Star and are fighting with the practitioners there. If we leave this place now and head to the Sun Star, we'll have to go through the place where the Shaman tribe has the most people among the 5 tribes, and we'll have to go through the back of the Shaman tribe. I don't even need to think to know that normal people like us who have lost our sword essences will definitely be chopped into minced meat by those crazy shamans in an instant. We'll just be going to our deaths if we head to the Sun Star now. Therefore, I suggest that we stay near the landing platform. When our practitioners win, they will naturally come and take back the areas suppressed by the Supreme Star. We will be safe when we meet up with those practitioners. The swordsman's words resonated with the others. It did sound like the safest plan. Humph. What if we practitioners can't win in the end? Leslie Dracula suddenly asked. How can we not win? Our Miss Ling should have reached the sun by now. With Miss Ling and her invincible billion sword technique, how can we humans lose? Victory will belong to us humans. The practitioner said proudly. He was clearly very confident in Liu Ling. Leslie Dracula pulled at her hair helplessly. Although I agree with you, as long as Miss Ling reaches the sun, victory will belong to us humans. The problem is, what if Miss Ling can't reach the sun like us? Silence, a deathly silence, little girl. You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. What did you mean by that? The elderly practitioner asked with a trembling body. Chapter 851. Do you think the Wu people would only target our team? Leslie Dracula asked with a bitter smile. I might not know about the others, but Ling's team suffered the same fate as ours. However, Ling's team suffered the same fate as us, or perhaps even worse than us. That's impossible. How could you possibly know about this? The sword bearer was so frightened that he took a step back. Then, he shouted angrily, Don't think that I'm a fool. Don't try to lie to me. I know about the Great Star Formation. The human quantum network can only be used in areas that have been successfully suppressed by the Great Zhou Tian Star Banner. It's impossible to use personal terminals to communicate in areas that have been breached. How could you possibly know about Miss Ling's situation? Of course I know. Leslie Dracula raised her wrist and revealed the personal terminal on her hand. She said with a gloomy expression, My and Ling's personal terminals are different from yours. Besides using the quantum network, our personal terminals can also rely on a special method to communicate. During a certain period of time, just now, Linren and I had regained communication. Ling warned me that the ancient sword-bearer in charge of receiving us might be the Wu people in disguise, because they fought with the Wu people inside the Star Shuttle and destroyed the entire Star Shuttle. Their Star Shuttle is about to crash. They won't be able to return to the Sun Star. What kind of special function is this? You rich people are really special. Even your personal terminals are different from us lowly commoners, the sword-bearer said sourly. The sword wielder said sourly. At this critical moment, he still had the time to be jealous of his gadget. This is not a special function. It's just a traditional radio wave. Gahan walked in front of the sword-bearer and said calmly, This is the science and technology before the apocalypse. There's not much technical difficulty. If you're willing, I can install this on your personal terminal now. That won't be necessary. Looking at Gahan's calm eyes and recalling his sharp sword skills, the sword-bearer could not help but feel his heart shrink. He obediently retreated. Miss Leslie Dracula, can you still contact Ling? Gahan turned to Leslie Dracula and asked. I can't contact her now. Leslie Dracula shook her head. Lin and I only had a short communication for less than 30 seconds. After that, the communication was forcibly cut off, and I never got in touch with Lin again. When did this happen? Gahan asked again. About 5 minutes ago, when you were fighting with the shaman tribe of the Shebi Corpse tribe. Leslie Dracula replied readily. I get it. The strength of communication between radios is determined by the distance between the two parties. The reason you were able to communicate with Linen for 30 seconds is because we should have been very close to Linen during those 30 seconds. However, because our star shuttle was moving at a high speed, we were out of the range of Ling after 30 seconds. That's why you lost contact with Ling. Am I right? I think that's what happened. Leslie Dracula lowered her head and said softly. You mentioned earlier that Ling's star shuttle had already been damaged and was in the process of crashing. Therefore, they should have lost the ability to move within a large range. It's like they're fixed in a certain position. Gohan suddenly walked up to the driver's seat of the star shuttle and slashed at a spot in front of the driver's seat. A hidden compartment popped out, and Gahan took out a map from it. Looks like the driver of this star shuttle must have maintained the star shuttle strictly according to the rules. Otherwise, the map wouldn't be in such good condition. Gahan opened up the map and drew a small circle on it. This is our current location, the Shenyang City ruins. Gahan drew a straight line not far away from Shenyang City. This line is the position we've been traveling through in the past 30 seconds. According to the data I know, the distance between two personal terminals through wireless communication is about 100 kilometers. Therefore, we'll draw a circle with a diameter of nearly 100 kilometers at the starting point of this line, and then draw a circle with a diameter of 100 kilometers at the ending point. This way, Miss Ling must have fallen at the place where these two circles overlap, which is this place. Guhan pointed at a spot on the map. Everybody immediately craned their necks to look. They saw the words Imperial Preceptor written on the spot where the two circles overlapped. Next to these two words, I used a small, dim font to mark the words Taiyan County. That's right. This is the area where the Imperial Preceptor Star is in charge of suppressing, which used to be Taiyan District. I suspect that Ling has fallen in Taiyan District. Gahan said loudly. Clap, 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 clap. Everyone applauded loudly for the young man, Gahan. They didn't expect that this young man was not only powerful, but also terrifyingly intelligent. He was able to calculate the location of Ling's fall with only a short time of communication. This was something that none of them could do. What should we do now? Someone immediately asked Gahan. Obviously, he wanted to listen to Gahan's opinion. However, they seemed to have forgotten that when the star shuttle landed, they had already acquiesced to Gahan's leadership. However, after Gahan had defeated the two Wu people of the Zhu Rong tribe, they had forgotten about Gahan. Until now, they once again wanted to listen to Gahan's opinion. My opinion is very simple. We can't stay in the Shenyang City ruins forever. After the two Wu people of the Zhu Rong tribe died, their bodies will return to their tribes through the earth veins. The shamans of the tribes will immediately discover that the Wu people who were sent to kill us have already died by our hands. Therefore, I believe that before long, they will arrange for more sorcerer warriors to come and kill us. Therefore, if we continue to stay here, we will definitely die. Everyone couldn't help but nod when they heard Gahan's words. They had to admit that Gahan's words were very reasonable. Staying here was indeed a dead end. Of course, just like what that senior was worried about, if we directly charge towards the sun, we will also die. So, the only thing we can do now is to increase our strength as quickly as possible and meet up with Ling and the others who have fallen in Taiyan District. The Lunyan family is the most powerful family in the world. They might have a way to recover our strength. Even if they don't have such a way, it will be safer with more people. So, my suggestion is very simple. We will immediately head to Taiyan District and find a way to find Ling's team. Then, we will meet up with Ling and think about the next step. Gahan gave a suggestion. Agreed. That's right, this is indeed the best idea. I have no objections. After all, these people trusted the Lunyan family more. So, when they heard that Gahan wanted to meet up with Lin Ling first, they immediately agreed. All right, since everyone agrees with my plan, then listen to my commands. Pack your things first, then leave the star shuttle together and head to Taiyan District. Unexpectedly, just as Gahan finished speaking, another disharmonious voice sounded out. Although your plan is not bad, why should we old guys listen to the commands of a junior? A middle-aged swordsman said unhappily, the amount of salt we've eaten together is more than the amount of rice you've eaten. Our experience and knowledge naturally far surpass yours. Furthermore, you juniors are careless and have no patience at all. You also don't pay attention to some details. On the other hand, us old fellows are naturally more comprehensive and thorough in our considerations. We also have more combat experience, so I think it's better to leave the commanding authority to us old fellows. You two juniors just need to listen to our commands and fight. This middle-aged swordsman wanted to seize the command by saying that they lacked experience and wanted Gahan to listen to their commands. What a joke! Gahan laughed coldly as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. What do you mean by eating more salt than rice? The amount of rice in a meal is thousands of times more salt. Are you all also thousands of times older than me? Are you all going to eat 3 taels of salt in a meal? Fine, I will give each of you 3 taels of salt later. If anyone can eat 3 taels of salt in a meal, I will listen to his command. Immediately, all the old guys were speechless. Who the hell could eat 3 taels of salt in a meal? If they really ate it, they would probably be dehydrated. Listening to Gahan's words, young people like Leslie Dracula felt very satisfied, because almost all young people were taught by the old with words like, "I've eaten more salt than you've eaten rice," or "I've walked more bridges than you've walked on roads." Generally speaking, young people couldn't refute it. Until now, when they heard Gahan's sharp rebuttal, they felt so comfortable that it was as if they had been slaughtered. Also, who is going to command me? Who is going to come out and fight? Could it be that there are 18 mouths that can order me and my cousin around? Guhan's sharp mockery caused the entire Star Shuttle to become even quieter. Forget it. I can't be bothered to care about your lives. If you're willing to listen to my command, then follow me now. If you don't want to listen to me, then go do whatever you want. You walk your open road, I walk my single log bridge. I want to see if the salt you've eaten can make you live a little longer. With that, Gahan directly left the Star Shuttle with Gu Xuanwu. Wait for me. I will resolutely listen to Comrade Gahan's command. Leslie Dracula immediately followed behind Gahan and left together with him. The remaining 17 middle-aged and old swordsmen looked at each other in dismay, and then uniformly rushed out like a swarm of bees. Although their face was completely ruined by this junior, compared to their own lives, face was not important. Chapter 852. What made Guhan and the others feel lucky was that there were not many magi in the area suppressed by the Supreme Star, hereafter referred to as the Supreme Star area, which was the Xinyang city ruins. When Gahan left with a large group of people, he didn't see a single Wu people along the way. Seeing this, Gahan couldn't help but sigh. It looks like the Wu people's battle potential is almost at this level. The Taiwei area was a very important area. It was equivalent to a strategic city like Luoyang or Shuzhou City. No matter what, there should be at least 1,000 or 800 soldiers guarding this area. But even with such a strategic city, Gahan and the others didn't see a single Wu people defending this place in 10 minutes. From this, it could be seen that the Wu people had put almost all their forces into the battlefield on planet Suzaku. However, this didn't mean that the Wu people's strategy was stupid. The fundamental goal of the Wu people wasn't to occupy these places for a long time. They wanted to break the Zhou Tian star battle formation as soon as possible and free their Zhu Wu. Therefore, their only goal was to break through the battlefield on planet Suzaku. As for planet Taiwei and planet Ziwei that had already been broken through, it was no longer important to them. As long as they didn't release the sword bearers that were trapped on planet Suzaku and planet Azure Dragon, that was enough. This directly led to Gahan and the others not seeing any new Wu people besides the 2 Wu people at the beginning. But aside from the Wu people, Gahan and the others saw something else. They saw a body that was carelessly thrown on the ground. This is the sword bearer that was originally guarding this place. Leslie Dracula let out a sad cry. The owner of this body looked like a human around 30 years old. There was only a sword sheath hanging on his waist. It seemed like he was an ancient sword bearer. The corpse had delicate features, and it could be seen that it should have been a handsome young man. Unfortunately, his stomach had been clawed to a pulp, and his internal organs and intestines had all been pulled out. Below his knees, his flesh had also become a bloody mess. It was as if his internal organs had been hollowed out by a giant beast with terrifying strength, and his legs had been broken. It could be seen that the sword wielder must have suffered a great deal of pain when he died, because his eyes were bulging and his mouth was slightly open. It was unknown whether he was muttering his last words at the moment of his death, or simply letting out a cry of pain. Poor guy, he should be at home with his son or daughter, not dying a miserable death here. A famed swordsman who was almost 60 years old lamented, "Perhaps the ones who should die are us old fellows. We can't move anymore, so it's better for us to die here. Why should we let such a poor child suffer?" The other sword-bearers all stood there motionlessly, their heads lowered as they silently muttered something. Clearly, they all had their own sentiments in their hearts. "Let's bury this child," one of the sword-bearers suggested. His suggestion was immediately echoed by the other sword-bearers. They all took out their sword maidens and prepared to dig a hole in the ground to bury the young victim. No, however, their actions were interrupted by a rough voice. The cold Gahan stood in front of them and said in an even colder voice, "We don't have time to waste on a dead person, unless you want to become a dead person like him." The troops of the sorcerer tribe could arrive at any time. Wasting a second here was very likely to cost a life. No one's allowed to stay here. Hurry to Tyne County at full speed. After Gahan's order was given, it seemed like no one intended to follow Gahan's order. They still stood silently beside the poor victim. All they wanted was to dig a hole. "Up to you. If you don't want to leave, I will." Seeing this scene, Gohan angrily shook his hand and took the lead to leave, just like what he had done in the Star Shuttle. "Let's go." A bunch of old fellows aren't as decisive as a brat. An old sword-bearer said in a self-mocking manner and left with Gohan. His actions caused the other sword-bearers to leave the place helplessly after saying a prayer. This was war, a cruel war of life and death. On the way, Gohan and the others saw more corpses. Most of these corpses were ancient sword-bearers, and a small portion were famed sword-bearers. These corpses were all incomplete. Some are missing arms, some are missing legs, and some are only left with arms, and some are only left with thighs. These corpses were obviously the sword-bearers who had died tragically under the sneak attack of the Wu people when they were guarding the Taiwei district. The ordinary people in the base cities often complained that their lives were already so painful, but they still had to let the sword-bearers ride on their heads. These sword-bearers lived in the safest places in the city, enjoyed the most delicious food that humans could enjoy, and rode on the most beautiful women. Some sword-bearers in their 70s or 80s could even play with young girls of 17 or 18, calling them maids. This world was so unfair. Being a sword-bearer was the most enviable profession in the world. These ordinary people would never see the real battlefield of the sword-bearers. As long as they did not experience a major invasion, 95% of the ordinary people in the world would die of old age. Although they did not have enough to eat, they would not starve to death. They might not have a house of their own, but they would definitely be able to find an urn that belonged to them. But what about the sword-bearers who had this common sense? Less than 15% of the sword-bearers in the world could die of old age. The other 85% could only die in the most painful way in the world, and then die so miserably that they did not even have an urn that belonged to them. In the end, their corpses could only be left in the wilderness, just like the sword-bearers they had met along the way. From this point of view, the ordinary people who complained about the unfairness of the world every day were probably the luckiest people in the world because they could live to the end safely. There was once a very famous line in a movie before the apocalypse, which went, "The greater the power, the greater the responsibility." If this line was slightly modified, it would probably be the best portrayal of the sword-bearers. The greater the power, the more enjoyment, and the more miserable the death. After about half an hour of nonstop galloping, Gohan and the others finally approached the edge of the Taiwei district. On the way, Gohan had only met 3 Wu people's junior magi, and all of them were directly taken care of by Gu Xuanwu. And after these 3 battles, Gu Xuanwu also told Gohan with great certainty that she could perfectly use her sword essence here, and would not be affected by the power of the stars. Just as everyone was about to leave the most dangerous Taiwei district, an accident suddenly happened. The 60-year-old sword-bearer in the team suddenly let out a cry, and then threw himself onto a corpse not far away, and began to cry unbridledly. "Little Wu, my poor little Wu, my child, sob, sob, sob." Gohan walked to the side of the sword-bearer, and found that what he was holding was a badly mutilated corpse. The corpse had been split into 2. The upper half only had a head and a small part of shoulder left, and the lower half only had half of a butt and a leg. As for where the middle part had gone, no one knew. Only the head of the corpse was preserved very well. From his appearance, he seemed to be a 30-year-old sword-bearer. His beard was unkempt, and he looked very rough. Purely from his appearance, there were some similarities between him and the sword-bearer who was crying while hugging his body. Based on the sword-bearer's crying, this corpse seemed to be his son. "What's going on?" Gohan asked in a low voice. "This is Old Chen's son." Another sword-bearer, who was about the same age as this sword-bearer, said with a sorrowful expression, "Old Chen is probably the only sword-bearer among us who took the initiative to join. He wasn't originally on the Sword Spirit's name list, but after hearing that I was on the list, he took the initiative to find the Sword Spirit, hoping to join this volunteer team. Old Chen made a lot of contributions when he was young, and he was over 60 years old, so the Sword Spirit didn't allow him to join this team at first. In the end, he knelt in front of the Sword Spirit and begged the Sword Spirit, so the Sword Spirit had no choice but to allow him to join. Could it be that he came to Shanghai Pass for his son, and this corpse is his son? Gohan guessed. Yes, this is his son. At this point, the sword-bearer paused. This is his only son. Actually, his son was also a bastard. He only became an ancient sword-bearer when he was 30 years old. A few days after becoming a sword-bearer, he took a fancy to a 16-year-old girl and used his identity as an ancient sword-bearer to force her to be his maid. In the end, his son was unlucky. This little girl's childhood sweetheart became an ancient sword-tier sword wielder when he turned 18. In less than a year, he became a treasured sword-tier sword wielder, and in 3 years, he became a famed sword-tier sword wielder, becoming a famous genius. And after this young man became a famed sword-bearer, he immediately collected all kinds of evidence that his bastard son had forced the girl to become his maid and filed a complaint with the Discipline Inspection Commission. The Discipline Inspection Commission naturally valued this young genius more, and his bastard son was indeed a bastard. So 3 months ago, the Discipline Inspection Commission sentenced him to 5 years in prison. In the end, Shanghai Pass was in urgent need of manpower, so his son, an ancient sword-bearer, was sent to Shanghai Pass. He said that as long as he could survive 3 years, he would be free when he returned. Old Chen couldn't bear to part with his son. This was his only son. He often dreamed that his son would die in Shanghai Pass. So when he heard that Shanghai Pass was in danger again, he volunteered to enter Shanghai Pass to see his son one last time. Who would have thought that all his dreams and hopes would come true at this moment? He did see his son one last time, but his son also died. My precious son. The swordsman couldn't bear to look at old Chen, who was crying his heart out. He gritted his teeth and said to Gohan, "Young man, I hope you can understand the pain of an old man who lost his son. You should at least give him a chance to rest in peace. I'll give him 5 minutes." Gohan licked his lips. Tell him to hurry up and dig a hole. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.